Good evening. Tonight, we enjoy a classic tale of the cool and collected Irish private eye, Philip Odell. Joining him is Heather McMara, as they set to depart to northern England to a newly opened pharmaceutical plant. There they find the development of a crucial flu vaccine is under threat from suspected sabotage. As the two delve deeper into the mystery, they face a series of enigmatic challenges, from mysterious deaths to intricate clues, all while navigating local opposition to the plant's operations. With each minute, the tension mounts, drawing you into a web of intrigue and danger. So, sit back, relax, and let us join Odell and McMara as they unravel the secrets of Test Room 8.
One morning around the beginning of August 1958, I was sitting in my office and thinking about the age of science I was living in. An atom-powered submarine had just sailed under the North Pole. Up in Scotland, they were building a power reactor which could turn out more nuclear energy than it consumed. And I was wondering whether all this had dehumanized us to the point where nobody was getting into any nice, warm human trouble that required a private investigator to get them out of. I hadn't had a client in more than 6 weeks. Heather, clattering the typewriter in the outer office, was reduced to copying out the police court news for our reference library in case I should ever work again. And then, suddenly, the typewriter stopped, and after a pause, the age of science walked right in on me. It came in the shape of a tall, energetic-looking character of about 50, with a yellowish face and quick eyes. Heather settled him into the visitor's chair and then introduced him.
This is Mr. Truscott. He's come on the recommendation of Dunlop, Wickham and Baines.
How do you do, Mr. Trescots? Cigarette?
Thanks.
I'll be outside if you need me.
Okay.
Thanks. Well, now, Mr. Odell, I'm Herbert Truscott of the Truscott Drug Company. I don't suppose you'll have heard a lot about us, but we're a very big company and very sound financially. At least we were. We've been established in the North since before the war.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the story right from the start. At the beginning of 57, 18 months ago, we decided to go into production of an influenza vaccine. Know anything about virology, Mr. Odell?
I don't even know what it is, Mr. Truscott.
Never mind. I see you get filled in on blanks like that before you start working for us.
Thanks. Good of you.
You know Barton Medworth, don't you?
I've heard of it, yes.
I picked Barton Medworth to manufacture our vaccine in because it's secluded. We want to keep our manufacturing process a secret, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I submitted my plans for the plant to Barton Medworth Borough Council as required by law. They threw them out.
Why?
Oh, a lot of claptrap about a factory building spoiling the aesthetic amenities of the town. But I wasn't going to have my plans upset by a lot of decaying monuments. No, I had my heart set on that plant. And do you know why?
Well, I imagine you stood to make money out of the vaccine.
No, Mr. Odell. My only son died in an epidemic of Asiatic flu.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Mr. Trescott.
So, I said we'd go over Barton Medworth's head. I had an industrial development certificate from the Board of Trade and a license to manufacture from the Ministry of Health. Wouldn't think you could have much more powerful ammunition than that, would you?
You would not, indeed.
I went and waved them under the noses of the County Planning Authority, and they set aside Barton Medworth's decision. Mr. Odell, you'd have thought I was the worst traitor this country had had since Lord Ho-Ho. And all I wanted to do was make an influenza vaccine. You know what influenza does to the economy of Britain every year?
I know what it does to my own economy. I get a bout of it practically every year.
Mind you, I must say in all fairness to Barton Medworth that the outcry wasn't what you'd call a spontaneous reaction. It was fostered largely by one man, Colonel Adrian Gessling, chairman of the Borough Council, retired army doctor, an enemy of vaccination in all forms. A blasted crank, in other words. He was behind it all.
Colonel Adrian Gessling?
Then Gessling bowled us a real snorter. He organized all the local landlords into not making an inch of living space available to our staff. And that really hurt. In the end, we had to build our own quarters.
You don't employ local labor, then?
No, everybody employed on this work has to be fully trained and qualified. Bacteriologists, lab workers, histologists, and so on. We had to import them into Barton Medworth, mostly from our other plants in the north, about 50 all told. You can work out how much money this venture has cost the company.
Must run into thousands.
750,000.
Well, I understand now why you said the Truscott company was financially sound.
Quite. Well, we overcame all the difficulties. And 3 months ago, we started in production. Right from the word go, we were in trouble. One slip-up after another. A faulty filter here and there, a batch of tissue culture dying on us without apparent reason. Minor breakdowns in air conditioning, things like that. So here we are, 2 months behind in our schedule after only 3 months in production.
You think someone's behind it?
Someone or a group.
Look, Mr. Trescott, what object would anyone have in wanting to upset your production?
Well, put me out of business. $750,000 sunk in this project, as I told you. I'm up to my neck personally. If this goes foot, I go foot with it.
Well, what do you want me to do, Mr. Trescott?
Go down to Barton Medworth, spy out the land, work in the plant.
Doing what?
Lab assistant, something of that sort.
Mr. Trescott, I appreciate your coming to me. I really do. I admire and appreciate what you're trying to do. I'd like to help you. But what I know about lab work and science in general, you could fit neatly into a flea's ear.
Oh, don't worry about that. The company has a training school up in Leeds. You can go there. They'll give you an assault course, 2 weeks. Cram the necessary dope into you.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think it's my mug of ale.
Dunlop, Wickham and Baines assured me you were the right man for the job.
I'm greatly obliged to Dunlop, Wickham and Baines.
Let's not waste any more time. Too much has been wasted already.
We turned it over for another hour or more. In the end, Mr. Trescott talked me into accepting the job. I had the feeling that Mr. Trescott could talk anyone into anything if he put his mind to it. I also had the feeling that he was holding something back. Well, finally, he looked at his watch, said he was late for an appointment, and got up. Just before he went out, he stopped and said,
That girl of yours, what's her name?
Heather McMara.
That'd be a sound notion to bring her along, too.
What, to Barton Medworth?
Why not? Set a woman to catch a woman, you know. And we employ about 20 women in that plant.
Would this mean Heather had to take one of those assault courses?
Be safer. Don't want anyone to suspect you're not a couple of bona fide workers.
No, of course not. Oh, man. I can just picture Heather's face when I tell her about the assault course.
This is your idea of a joke, of course.
No, Heather, I promise you.
You took this job on in full possession of your faculties?
Sure.
Then you can't be in full possession of your faculties, that's obvious. This is quite the craziest thing even you've ever done.
It's very simple, Angel. My banking account. It was in crying need of quick replenishment.
An assault course. How to be a lab assistant in 2 crazy weeks. It's like going back to school, isn't it?
Sort of. Ever been to Leeds before?
I passed through it once on the way to Scotland.
It's a big, thriving place.
So I hear.
If we went down to the dining car, we might be able to get a drink.
I'm quite content to look out of the window, thank you.
It's raining.
I can still look out of the window when it's raining. I'll tell you something. The only piece of scientific equipment I can handle is a pair of eyebrow tweezers.
And I'll tell you something now. Mr. Herbert Truscott, founder and managing director of the Truscott Drug Company, happened to roll his tongue around the figure 5,000
Pounds?
pounds.
Pass me over that copy of Science for the Masses and let me get started.
Herbert Truscott hadn't mixed his metaphors when he described it as an assault course. During the next 2 weeks, including Sundays, they fairly pummeled scientific data into our shrinking brains. And then, with our senses reeling, we were packed off to Barton Medworth. Heather to report to the statistical department to which she was assigned, and me to the big white chief himself, the director of the entire production staff, Dr. Hugh Chalk. A lean, youngish-looking character, with one of those dedicated airs you often find among people who work on the frontiers of science. He didn't look so much like a human being in the accepted sense as a sort of white-coated appendage to a laboratory bench. You couldn't picture him dancing or getting drunk or smiling into the eyes of a woman. But that was only the superficial appearance. Later on, it turned out to be very misleading indeed. Well, I introduced myself to him. He was, I knew, the only other person beside Truscott who knew why I was really there. And he got straight down to business.
Well, as they told you at Leeds, the actual production of the vaccine is carried out in sterile rooms. Production suites, we call them, like surgical operating theaters. The suites are on either side of this corridor, and to get into them, you have to pass through one of these sterilization rooms, where you must wash and put on sterile clothing. Morning, David.
Morning, Hugh.
I'll be coming in to see you presently. Where will you be?
In tissue culture.
Okay. That was David Carswood, our chief bacteriologist. He developed the process by which we're making the vaccine. Brilliantly clever. He won the Nobel Prize in '53.
He looks very young.
Older than he looks. I suppose if you're so completely dedicated to something as David is to bacteriology, you don't experience the ordinary stresses and strains of life, and therefore you don't show your age so much.
Either that or spending so much time in a sterile atmosphere.
Yes.
Tell me something. What's your opinion of Truscott's theory?
That somebody is trying to sabotage the production.
Do you think there's anything in it?
I don't know. Herbert Truscott's not an imaginative man. He's too absorbed in amassing money for that. Look, I'd rather not express any opinion on it, if you don't mind. I'm employed here to direct a purely scientific operation.
But you stand to lose if it blows up, don't you?
Do I? I wonder. Now, the next thing I must show you is this. The Void.
Good title for a science thriller. What is it?
Now, step inside. Oh, watch your head.
What a place.
This is where we pump all the services into the production suites. Electricity, gas, and air conditioning. The void runs the entire length of the building, between the two working floors, so you can pump all the services in, either up through the floor or down from the ceiling.
Very ingenious.
It means you eliminate exposed pipes, which are apt to collect dirt and break sterility, as we call it. Oh, excuse me. Ken, are you there?
Yes? Who is it?
Hugh Chalk, I'd like a word with you.
Coming.
And that's Ken Armstrong. He's our maintenance engineer in charge of the void.
Morning, Hugh. What can I do for you?
Ken, this is Philip Odell, just joined us.
How do you do?
Mr. Armstrong?
Everybody calls me Ken.
I'm just taking Odell around the plant.
Well, you'll not find anything more efficient than this void.
I understand you had a little trouble with the air conditioning recently.
Who told you that?
It's all right, Ken. Mr. Truscott told him about the breakdowns.
I see.
And what actually happened?
Well, during the third week we were in production, just when the tissue culture was entering a very delicate phase, this air conditioning unit took it into its head to pack up on 3 separate occasions, on the Monday, the Wednesday, and the Friday.
Ruining the culture?
Completely. The curious thing was that it packed up in the middle of the night on each occasion, between midnight and 5 a.m., as near as we've been able to estimate it.
When the plant was closed down?
Not entirely. We have a 24-hour shift in tissue culture. There was nobody here in the void. Ken staffs this by himself.
I usually come over about 11 o'clock every night and check over the channels. On those 3 nights, the air conditioner was working perfectly. And when I came on again at 8 in the morning, it was all right again. But during those 5 hours, it went right out of commission.
A fault in the mechanism?
No, if it broke down, it couldn't right itself.
You mean that somebody came up here and turned it off at midnight, and then turned it on again at 5 a.m.?
Well, I can't think of any other explanation. But this void's kept locked at night, and there are only 3 keys. Dr. Chalk here has one, I have one, and the third is kept in the safe in Dr. Chalk's office.
Who has access to the safe?
David Carswood and myself.
And Mr. Trescott?
Well, yes, but it's hardly likely that he'd have come up here and deliberately ruined the culture, is it?
No, I suppose not. Ken, do you remember what you did on those 3 nights?
Same as I always do. I went across to the quarters, listened to the radio for an hour, and then went to bed.
And the key didn't go out of your possession?
Not for a second. And I locked the door of my bedroom at night.
There's no way into this void except through the door?
None at all. There aren't any windows, no inlets from the floor above, only this one door.
While all this was going on, Heather was in the statistical section getting her baptism of fire from the head of statistics in person.
Statistical checks are very important in vaccine production, Heather, as you know.
Oh, yes, Miss Ulrich. I appreciate that.
Call me Barbara. It makes for a happier atmosphere, don't you think?
Yes.
There's apt to be a rather strained atmosphere in a production unit like this. Apart from anything else, there's the danger of infection. The vaccine we work with is very active and concentrated. If it did escape from the culture and you breathed it in, it would probably result in a paralysis of the lungs.
Putting a swift end to you.
Very swift. So we all have to observe the safety regulations to the letter. Come into my office and we'll go over them. By the way, you have had lab experience, haven't you?
Oh, yes. Labs have always fascinated me, from a very early age.
This is tissue culture. We'll go in and talk to David Carswood.
Fine.
Over here, Hugh.
David, this is Philip Odell.
Oh, yes, the new lab assistant. Welcome to the fold, Philip.
Thanks.
I hear you've been working in Canada.
Yes, the Keith Foundation in Montreal.
Oh, with my friend Paul Thayer.
Uh-huh.
How is he?
Oh, just the same. Still addicted to sports cars.
One of these days he's going to break his neck.
Yeah, that's what everyone says.
David, I haven't given Philip the detail of the culture process. Perhaps you'd fill him in.
Of course, be pleased to.
I'll be next door. I want to look over the new test culture.
Right you are, Hugh. Well, very simply, this is how we make the vaccine. We isolate a typical flu virus of the Asiatic variety, and we grow it on the cells taken from healthy monkeys. Then we inactivate it with a 40% solution of formaldehyde gas.
Giving you formalin.
Exactly. We then put the culture through a lengthy filtering process, test it, and finally seal it in glass ampoules. The entire process takes about 6 months to complete.
What's the yield on one batch of vaccine?
Oh, about 300,000 doses.
Same as polio vaccine.
Yes, we follow the polio process fairly closely. The main difference is the stabilizing element. As you know, the big problem in all vaccine production is not how to inactivate the virus, but how to keep it inactive, how to stabilize it so that it won't break loose and give you the disease it's designed to protect you against.
You have a special stabilizing agent.
Yes, a company patent made to a secret formula. It's known as the Carswood stabilizer.
Oh, after you?
Well, yes. Actually, Wynne Craxton and I developed it together. You'll meet Wynne, a very able bacteriologist.
Mm-hmm. Is this what you got the Nobel Prize for, the stabilizer?
Yes.
By the way, I hear you've had some bad luck recently.
Yes, a whole series of mishaps. We held an exhaustive inquiry. Nobody was able to throw much light on it, but there was one thing. I didn't tell anyone, but one night, the Monday of the third week...
The first time the air conditioning broke down?
Yes, I was on the night shift. I went into the stockroom and noticed there was a light in Hugh Chalk's office across the corridor. I got what I wanted from the stockroom, and then I went across to the office, but there was no one there.
Was the light still on?
No.
Was the door of the safe open?
No, I thought I must have been seeing things and went back to the lab.
I see. Why didn't you tell anyone about it?
Oh, David, the new batch of roller tubes have just come from Manchester. You better come and look at them.
Was something wrong?
Well, they're made to your design, I know, but personally, I think they're about 1 inch in diameter too small for the rotating machine.
Oh, that's odd. Oh, by the way, this is Philip Odell, Wynne Craxton.
How do you do?
Oh, how do you do? You're working here?
Yes. I haven't been assigned to a particular job yet, though.
Who engaged you, Hugh?
No, Mr. Truscott.
I see. Mr. Truscott decides the sort of people we need now, does he?
Oh, isn't he managing director of the company?
Yes, man, but he's not a scientist. He knows nothing about the process or the kind of people you need to work it successfully. All he knows about are the profits it makes.
Oh, Wynne, let's go and see the roller tubes. I won't keep you long, Philip.
Okay. No hurry.
Well, did you make any progress this morning?
I'm getting my bearings.
Any clues yet?
I don't know. Maybe.
Don't you know when you found a clue, then?
Not always. People say things, quite ordinary things, in a certain way, and that sticks in your mind. Later on, when you've found out more about them and about the situation in general, it falls into place. A clue.
This is liable to be a long process, then.
Who can say?
Well, I'll take you along to meet Martin Derson. He's my deputy. He'll assign you to a specific job. The sooner that's fixed, the better.
This is the stock-holding bay, Mr. Odell, where we keep the test monkeys.
Mm-hmm. You test the vaccine on these little fellas?
In the final stages, yes.
They're a lively bunch, aren't they?
Oh, yes, we keep them in top physical condition.
Very interesting. Where do I work, Dr. Derson?
Here.
Here?
There's a duty list on the wall. Give me a ring on the house phone if there's anything you don't understand. My number's 101.
So, the net result of that brain-busting assault course is that now I'm a valet to a bunch of monkeys. Well, I'm glad you think it's funny, isn't it?
Well, don't you?
Well, feeding them, taking their temperature, singing to them?
Singing to them? You sing to the monkeys, Odell?
Sometimes.
Is that on your duty list?
No, it's an extra. Well, there's one little character, I call him Elvis. Now, when I sing to him, he really gets sent. He practically knocks the top off his cage, bobbing up and down, clapping his little hands.
Why Elvis?
Well, he has 2 black streaks down either side of his face.
Of course. Well, I'm going to have to leave you in a minute, Odell. Exposure to this rarefied atmosphere of records and statistics has made me terribly sleepy.
Well, one more for the road.
Twist my arm. These rooms aren't exactly spacious, are they?
Oh, I don't know. I can move between the bed and the chest of drawers if I do it sideways. Well, if I put any weight on, of course, it... cheers.
Cheers. Discovered anything your first day? Apart from the fact that monkeys dig the blues.
Oh, a few things. Hugh Chalk doesn't like Trescott. He thinks my being here is a lot of nonsense. He makes sneering little remarks about clues. David Carswood kept his mouth buttoned up on a vital bit of information. And Dr. Wynne Craxton makes like the Demon King when the name of Herbert Truscott is mentioned and dissolves into a fine Welsh frenzy. Ken Armstrong has a shifty pair of eyes. Well, as shifty as any you'd see outside of Leicester Square. And Dr. Martin Derson, late of Heidelberg, doesn't believe I'm really a lab assistant at all. He puts me to work looking after the monkeys. It could add up to a lot or to nothing. What about you?
Well, I think I've uncovered something important.
Oh, good. Let's have it.
My chief, Barbara Eurich. I told you about her, didn't I?
You did.
Well, she's 26, she doesn't wear a wedding ring, and she looks like Sophia Loren.
Well?
You know what Sophia Loren looks like, don't you?
Intimately. She measures no less than 18 feet on the wide screen.
Well, that's it.
You don't think Miss Eurich is Sophia Loren, do you?
Odell, are you being deliberately obtuse?
No, I'm trying to hang on to the shirt tails of your idea, if that's what you have.
Does Sophia Loren look like a statistician?
Ah, I get it. Barbara Eurich's a glamour puss. Therefore, she must be up to something shady. Oh, dear. Dubious reasoning, if characteristically female. I think you're trying too hard, Angel. You better go home and get some sleep.
You're going to feel pretty stupid, aren't you, if it comes out that she is behind all the trouble.
Is there any trouble?
Well, the air conditioning did fail 3 times in a week.
Yes, but is there really some dark plot to ruin Herbert Truscott? Or is it only a figment of his imagination? Or did he only represent it that way to me?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, time went by. The days faded into one another in a blur of long hours at the plant. White figures in gauze masks working complex equipment, the bright glare of antiseptic rooms, the thick, heavy odor of disinfectant. And in vivid contrast, the cages of bright-eyed monkeys with their lively chatter and eager movements. Nothing went wrong, no slip-ups, no catastrophes. Well, one afternoon, I left the plant and I went down into the town to get a film for my camera. Cutting through a narrow passageway, I saw a lean-featured, white-haired man with a regimental tie and mad eyes coming toward me. We passed, almost touching, and then he stopped and called to me.
Mr. Odell. You are Philip Odell, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
I'm Colonel Gessling.
Oh, yes, I've heard of you.
Nothing to my credit, I'm sure. But I'm glad to meet you.
How did you know my name?
From the postman, the main source of information in a small town like this.
Well, how did the postman know my name?
From the letters he delivers you. I understand you're working in the lab at Trescots.
Only in a minor capacity.
I wonder whether you'll come to my house one evening. I think it's high time an end was put to the hostility between Truscotts and the people of Barton Medworth, don't you?
Oh, from all I hear, that hostility didn't begin with Trescots.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. Perhaps we could discuss it more fully.
If you think it would do any good. Colonel Gessling, why did you pick on me?
Herbert Truscott isn't an easy man to approach. Neither are Hugh Chalk, Martin Derson, or any of your other top scientific people.
I see.
Well, give me a ring one evening soon, won't you? I'm in the book.
Okay.
Nice to have met you.
Oh, Colonel Gustling.
Yes?
I haven't had any letters since I've been here. Not a single one.
I'll wait to hear from you. Goodbye.
Good morning, Philip. We have a change of job for you.
Well, that's welcome news.
Getting tired of the monkeys?
Well, their unrelieved company doesn't offer much in the way of intellectual stimulation, you know.
We're going to start a series of preliminary tests. We've drawn off a sample of the present batch of vaccine in process. We don't want any slip-ups as before. So I've arranged it that we work in 2 12-hour shifts throughout the tests. Odell and David on one shift, Derson and Win Craxton on the other.
And the test will last 5 days. We want to be absolutely sure this time.
How about the void?
Ken Armstrong's going to cover at night. A man arrived from Manchester this morning to take over during the day.
We want to make the first test inoculations by noon today.
Using how many monkeys?
6. I want you to come and help me choose them. They're used to you by this time.
You, want him? Elvis?
Why not? He's a healthy little chap. Well, I see he's a pal of yours. Well, look, Philip, I'm pretty sure this sample's 100%. The inoculation won't hurt him.
How about the post-mortems?
We only need 3. And Elvis can be one of the 3 who'll be excused.
Oh, fine. Well, Elvis, old boy, you're in luck. The witch doctor really spoke up for you this time, didn't he?
Well, Philip, how's it going?
All right. David and I were unlucky. We drew the night shift. You're up late, Hugh.
What time is it?
It's nearly 2 a.m.
I couldn't sleep, worrying about these tests.
I don't think you've got much to worry about. We're on the 3rd day now, and so far nothing but negative reactions.
That's very good. Where's David?
He's next door in test room 8.
Well, why is he using that? It's the smallest room in the suite.
Well, we have only one monkey in there, and David uses him as a sort of control. It's little Elvis. You know, David's been a long time in there. I wonder if he's found something. Oh.
Oh, something wrong?
Would you come here a minute?
Great heavens. No, don't go in there. Put your mask on.
So tired.
It's okay, David. We've got you.
So dreadfully tired. Can hardly lift.
That's all right.
You know what this is, don't you?
No.
He's inhaled a live virus. This is the first stage of paralysis. The deadly lassitude.
Any word from the hospital?
Nothing fresh. David's still in the iron lung. Martin's with him. He'll phone if there's any development.
I don't understand how it could have happened. David was working in a completely sterile atmosphere. The vaccine samples had a 3-day stability. None of the monkeys has been infected.
Except Elvis.
What?
He died an hour ago.
Hello, Hugh Chalk speaking. Thanks, Martin. David Carswood died 5 minutes ago.
Well, this may show on the record that he died as a result of an accident. But actually, it's a case of murder. A completely sterile atmosphere, operating room conditions, yet he gets a fatal infection. Something so virulent that it kills him within 2 hours.
But it couldn't get in here. There's no window, no pipes, no ventilators.
Just this, in the ceiling here. Once upon a time when I was very young, I wanted to be a surgeon. I thought it was the finest, the noblest thing a man could be. But somewhere along the way, the dream got lost. I never became a surgeon. Looking back on it, I can see it was just as well. Every time a patient died on the table, I should have reproached myself, and being Irish, I would have overdone that to the point where I'd have been carted off to the madhouse. I felt the same way now that David Carswood was dead. I kept telling myself that if I'd been a bit smarter, it wouldn't have happened. Somewhere I'd missed an important clue, a vital lead. It had all started when Herbert Truscott turned up in my office one August morning. He told me that somebody was trying to ruin him by causing breakdowns in the production of the new influenza vaccine his company was making at the plant in Barton, Medworth. a venture in which he had sunk $750,000. It had struck me then that it was an odd thing for him to hire a private investigator to find out who that somebody was and what exactly was going on. The job seemed to cry aloud for a man with scientific training, a bacteriologist, for instance. To give it to a guy like me, well, it was unorthodox, to say the least of it. Especially as he had made it a condition that Heather and I should work in the plant, posing as trained technicians. Well, we'd gone through an assault course at the company's school in Leeds to give us the necessary jargon, and then been installed. Heather as a statistician, and me as a lab assistant. Only the director of the unit, Dr. Hugh Chalk, knew what we were really there for. 2 weeks had gone by, and we had been able to find out precious little. The production holdups had stopped, and I was beginning to think that Herbert Truscott had misread the whole situation when a bolt from the blue. David Carswood, chief bacteriologist and inventor of the process by which the vaccine was made, collapsed during the course of some routine tests and had died 2 hours later. The fact that he'd been afflicted by that deadly lassitude, the onset stage of the infection by a paralyzing virus, strongly suggested that the vaccine he had been working with had suddenly become active. Or had this mysterious someone who had tried to stop the production now turned to murder? If so, maybe we had a killer in our midst, probably in Trescott House, where all of 50 of the production unit were living. Well, I got a little sleep towards dawn, and at 9 o'clock went over to the plant. I walked down the wide corridor which divided the production suites in which the vaccine was made. The suites were all deserted, the machines shut down. I knocked on the door of Hugh Chalk's office, and his voice told me to go in. He was sitting behind his desk looking as though he'd spent the night with the banshees. Wynne Craxton, assistant chief bacteriologist and Carswood's collaborator, was also in the room.
Well, Odell, we're out of business.
So I see, Hugh. What's Herbert Truscott going to say about it?
Oh, what can he say? That batch of vaccine was lethal. We can't risk more lives. Hugh took the decision to stop production at once.
Helped by you?
I advised it, yes. What are you getting at?
You hate Herbert Truscott, don't you, Dr. Craxton?
No, I don't hate him. I think... Look, I don't have to answer to you for anything I may think or do.
No, you don't.
Unless, of course, Herbert Truscott planted you here to spy on us.
Why should he feel there was any need for you to be spied on?
Truscott has an enormous amount of money tied up in this vaccine.
Yes.
He also stands to make a great deal more out of it.
Not now, not since you closed down his plant.
I am director of this unit, Odell. I'm responsible for the safety of the people who work here.
Does Truscott know what you've done?
No. I don't need Truscott to show me where my duty lies.
Truscott's concept of duty is based solely on profits.
Did you know that his only son died in an epidemic of Asiatic flu?
Oh, Herbert Truscott's a crusader now, is he? A benefactor of suffering humanity. Are you really as naive as all that, Odell?
I think you should have given him the chance to make the decision himself. Now you've shut down the machines, the vaccine culture and process will die. And there's another heavy loss for him.
He'd be compelled to close sooner or later.
By whom?
The coroner. There'll have to be an inquest on David, you know.
Obviously.
And the autopsy will show that he was in contact with a faulty vaccine.
How do you know that?
Well, it's obvious. He showed all the symptoms.
Then why weren't you infected? Why wasn't I? We were both working on those tests. Why was Carswood the only one to be infected?
How do you know you're not infected, Odell?
I don't.
Exactly. Do you still think I did wrong to close the plant?
Yes, I do.
Well, that's carrying loyalty to Truscott to the point of insanity. He wouldn't risk his life for you or for anyone else, let me tell you that.
Dr. Chalk, what have you told the rest of the staff? How did you explain the closing down?
I didn't explain it. I merely announced that there was a temporary suspension of the operation and that they were to stand by until further notice.
Don't you think they'll be able to connect this with Carswood's death?
I don't see why they should. The fact that a man collapses and dies while working with vaccine doesn't necessarily mean that he was infected by the vaccine, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I doubt there's a single person over in Trescott House who would believe it.
Who are you to question our decisions? That's what I'd like to know. Who are you?
Don't tell me that Dr. Chalk hasn't told you.
I have, as a matter of fact. In view of what's happened, I felt it was justified.
Makes us all feel much safer knowing that we have a brilliant private investigator in our midst.
Well, I don't see much point in going on with this. I came here to ask for the key of the void. Mr. Truscott hired me to investigate, and I propose to do a little investigating.
Why the void?
Look, Dr. Craxton, let's make a deal. You make your decisions, and I won't question them. I'll make mine, and you don't question them, okay?
All right. But I can't think what you hope to find in the void.
May I have the key?
It's in the safe.
Oh, I'll get it. I know the combination.
Have you talked to Ken Armstrong yet? He was in the void all last night.
No, I tried to contact him over at the house, but he'd gone out.
Here's the key. Do you want any help?
No, thank you. By the way, has Mr. Truscott been informed about what's happened?
I'm waiting for a call from Manchester now, as a matter of fact.
Well, that should make lurid listening. You'd be well advised to hold the receiver at least a foot away from your ear.
Odell,
Oh, hello, Heather. How are you this morning?
Is it true what they're saying?
Who's they?
Well, Barbara Eurich, actually. I had breakfast with her. She told me the plant had closed down.
Oh, that's true.
She said that David Carswood died during the night.
That's true, too.
She said it was because a batch of vaccine was faulty. Is that true?
Nobody can say until after the post-mortem.
What do you think?
I think you're pretty.
Stop it.
I do, honestly. Every time I see you, I think she's pretty.
How about Barbara Eurich?
Oh, I think she's pretty, too.
Well, she thinks the same about you. We talk quite a lot about you.
Did you? You, think she may have a thing about me?
Oh, no, she's wedded to her work. Statistics are her whole life. But she's interested in you. She seemed to be pumping me, asking me about what you did, where you worked before, and how long I'd known you.
What did you tell her?
Nothing. I pursued a policy of masterly evasion.
Well, you needn't have bothered. The cat's now out of the bag. Hugh Chalk has told Craxton that I'm a private investigator hired by Truscott.
What did he do that for?
I don't know. The more I know about Chalk, the less straightforward he seems. And that goes for practically everyone concerned with this affair. Craxton and Martin Derson and Ken Armstrong, even that gorgeous Miss Eurich. Now, why should she suddenly display such a keen interest in me and my secrets?
Well, you're not bad looking, you know.
Thank you.
She is a young woman, even if she's up to her ears in statistics. Where are you going, by the way?
The void.
Oh, yes, the place where all the air conditioning comes from.
And the heating, the lighting, the water, and the filtering.
Where is it?
Between the two floors.
This isn't it, is it?
No, this is test room 8. This is where David Carswood was working last night.
Oh. He was murdered in here, then?
Who said he was murdered?
Or wasn't he?
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out. Now, he was working at this table when we found him.
Looks harmless enough.
A completely sterile atmosphere, operating room conditions, and yet he gets a fatal infection, something so virulent that it kills him within 2 hours.
But it couldn't get in here. There's no window, no pipes, no ventilators.
Just this, in the ceiling here.
What is it?
The air conditioning inlet from the void. Now, that's directly above this table, isn't it? 18 inches, 2 feet above his head. Okay, let's go up to the void and see what we can find there. Watch your head.
What a creepy-looking place. All these shafts and weird contraptions. Like something in a horror film. What's that you've got?
A broken ampoule.
Like the ones they seal the vaccine in?
Yeah.
Where did you find it?
On the floor here, beside the air conditioning unit, which feeds test room 8. Come over here a minute. Now, put your head in there.
I'd rather not if you don't.
Go on. There isn't a vampire in there. Now, do you see anything?
Yes, something like a fan.
It's a booster fan. Now, watch.
It's fascinating. Oh, but it's blowing my hair all over the place. Oh, Odell, is this supposed to mean something?
Somebody gets in here during the night. He knows Carswood is immediately below in test room 8. He has an ampoule of active virus culture. He breaks the ampoule, turns up the booster fan, and blows the virus right down on Carswood. Carswood inhales it, and 2 hours later he's dead. Now, what's wrong with that?
Oh, it sounds wonderful.
There's only one thing wrong with it.
What's that?
You drop a heavy liquid like those vaccines are made of into that shaft, and all it does is drop to the bottom of the shaft, no matter how hard the fan blows it.
Quite the Madame Curie this morning, aren't we?
Anybody in here?
Yes, over here.
Who is it?
Ken Armstrong.
Morning, Mr. Odell. I hear you've been looking for me.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You were on duty in the void last night, weren't you?
I was. I came on at 11 and went off at 7 this morning.
Were you here the whole time?
No, I went off to get a bit of supper.
What time was that?
Oh, about 1:45.
So you were away at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Was anybody in here when you came back? Was there?
Look, Mr. Odell, I want to help all I can. I've been with this company for 10 years and they've always treated me well.
Now, look here,
I'd
Ken.
rather not answer any more questions. Not until Mr. Truscott gets here.
Is this your own idea?
What do you mean?
Did somebody tell you not to answer my questions? I see. Somebody did. Was it Hugh Chalk?
Dr. Chalk's in charge of the unit, isn't he?
Okay. What time is Mr. Truscott expected here?
Midday. He's driving down from Manchester.
Well, Ken, if you know where there's a blast-proof shelter, I'd get in it at midday today.
And have I not got £750,000 tied up in this project? A sum which I may add includes every blasted bean I personally possess in this world? I want an explanation, and I want it quick. Who ordered the plant to be closed down?
I did.
You did, Chalk. I see. Now, can we take one more step forward? Why did you order it to close down?
Surely that's obvious.
It's only obvious, Dr. Chalk, if you're trying to ruin me. Is that what you're trying to do?
No, of course it isn't. I closed the plant down because I was not prepared to risk the safety of the staff.
Who said the staff was in danger?
I did. It's obvious that David Carswood died because their batch of vaccine was faulty.
It isn't obvious at all. Croxton's still alive, so is Derson, so is Odell, and so are 5 of the test monkeys.
Isn't the main issue here the fact that David Carswood is dead?
No, it is not. Personally, I'm very sorry that he's dead. He was a fine scientist and a very worthwhile human being. It grieves me greatly that this should have happened.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
Croxton, I'll overlook that. I know that you worked with Carswood for years and that you were very close. Well, naturally, you're upset and don't know what you're saying.
I do know what I'm saying. It makes me sick that all you can think of at a time like this is the amount of money that's involved. That really sickens me.
Would you mind leaving us? A very brilliant bacteriologist is Wynne. Very unstable emotionally.
I happen to agree with him.
Perhaps you'd like to join him.
I certainly would. And what's more, you can have my resignation.
Fairly surrounded by prima donnas this morning, aren't we?
I always had scientists figured as a cold fish.
Can things get any worse? Now production stopped again, and we're minus our chief bacteriologist.
I can see things getting much worse, Mr. Truscott. David Carswood was quite a figure in the world of bugs. Winner of the Nobel Prize and so forth. The inquest's going to attract a lot of attention.
I know, I've been thinking about that.
Now, the best thing to do is press for an adjournment. The coroner might listen if it's put to him in the right way.
What about the autopsy?
It's been done at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The coroner's thinking in terms of starting the inquest tomorrow evening.
Well, that doesn't give us much time, does it?
That's why we need an adjournment. As I see it, the autopsy's almost certain to show that Carswood died of a virus infection. He had all the symptoms, the lassitude and so forth. So it's obvious what the coroner, or his jury, if he sits with one, is going to say about it.
He'll say our vaccine went wrong.
And the moment that gets out, you've hedged your chips, Mr. Trescott. The Ministry of Health will revoke your license to manufacture so fast that it won't be funny. And then you're really out of business.
Have you got any constructive ideas?
You want it straight?
Of course.
All right. Well, I haven't a thing to offer in the way of proof. Not to you, the coroner, or anyone else. I've been on this job a month, and what I've been able to pick up in the way of hard fact you could write down on the back of a postage stamp. So in view of the urgency and what's at stake for you, I'm ready to quit right here and now and let you hire someone else.
You want to quit?
No, but if I were you, I wouldn't stake £750,000 on me.
I'll do it just the same.
Thanks. All right, the first thing to be done is to get Ken Armstrong to open his mouth.
What does he know?
Well, something happened in the void last night, around 2 o'clock, the time Carswood collapsed. And Armstrong knows about it, but he refused to tell until you arrived. Hugh Chalk stopped him.
That's Hugh Chalk. Okay, I'll tell Armstrong. Where is he?
I think he's over at the house.
Anything else you want?
Yes, I'd like to search Carswood's room. The door is locked.
Chalk again?
I imagine so.
All right. I'll see you get a set of master keys.
The door wasn't locked.
So I noticed. What are you doing in here, Miss Ulrich?
Going through David's papers?
Why?
Because Dr. Chalk told me to.
Huh? Why did he do that?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Miss Ulrich, you're an intelligent woman, a statistician and so forth. You're not trying to tell me, are you, that you'd go through someone's private papers without knowing why?
Cigarette?
Thanks.
I was talking to Heather McMara about you at breakfast this morning, as no doubt she told you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Is she your girlfriend?
Isn't girlfriend a rather juvenile term for someone like you to you?
I could put it a more adult way if you like.
Never mind. Why are you so interested?
Statistics aren't the only things I'm interested in. I'd like to know why David Carswood was killed and who killed him.
How do you know he was killed?
Wasn't he?
Nobody knows, not until after the autopsy.
Fui.
Miss Ulrich, you get to be less like a lady scientist with each passing minute.
Good. Are you going to make a pass at me?
Well, I hadn't thought of it, but I could, given a little encouragement.
You don't look the sort of man who needs encouragement. Do you think I'm attractive?
I do.
More attractive than Heather?
Shall we sit down?
If you like.
I find it easier to concentrate if you don't have the light behind you. Looking the way you do, Miss Ulrich.
Couldn't you try calling me Barbara?
Okay. Well, as I was saying, for a beautiful woman like you, it must be very easy to decide that most men are weak, mindless fools. All you have to do is give them one of those slow up-from-under smiles, and they roll over with all four paws in the air.
Something tells me you're not going to do that.
Oh, I'm as susceptible to the treatment as the next man, maybe more so. But, Barbara, you're pitching it too strong. Much, much, much too strong.
What does that mean?
It means it's phony, bogus, corny, and overdone.
That's nice, isn't it?
You're scared, Barbara. You have uncertainty, apprehension, doubt, and all plain, honest-to-God fear written all over your lovely face. Also, your clever little mind is popping with urgent questions. You think I might have the answers, so you give me the up-from-under treatment.
In the belief that you'll tell all.
Something like that. What were you looking for in Carswood's papers? Yes, who is it?
Heather!
Come in.
Oh. Am I interrupting something?
Excuse me?
What's the matter with her?
She made seductive noises at me, and it didn't work.
You feeling ill or something?
Heather, did you want me for anything in particular?
Oh, yes. There's a phone call for you. I told him to put it through to your room.
We better go up right away, eh? Hello. Odell speaking.
Mr. Odell, this is Colonel Guestling. You remember me, don't you?
Ah, indeed I do, Colonel. What can I do for you?
Could you come over and see me?
Sure. When do you want me to come?
As soon as possible.
I'll leave right away.
I live just outside Barton Midworth, village called Drayton Green.
I know it.
My house is opposite the church.
Okay, I'll find it.
It's very important, Mr. Odell. I'll expect you in half an hour.
I'll be there. Now, I wonder what he wants.
Why don't we go and see?
We?
You're not leaving me behind this time. There may be other beautiful women with seductive ideas.
Colonel Gessling's house was small, old, and what the estate agents call, with their cavalier disregard for the true meaning of words, a bijou residence. Well, there was nothing jewel-like about it. It looked like something General Gordon might have lived in during one of his more uncomfortable campaigns. A burly woman in a flowered apron opened the door to us. She seemed to know all about us and showed us into a room off the hall which contained a quite appalling amount of chinoiserie. Black lacquered cabinets, tables, and chairs crawling with lurid dragons and weird winged beasts. Thick curtains draped the windows, and we sat there in the half-light feeling that we had wandered into a Fu Manchu story. Well, 30 minutes later, the door opened and a youngish woman came in. Her thin face was very pale, and the way she dressed her hair, scraped straight back, it didn't help any. She looked us over very carefully with a pair of dark eyes and then said,
I'm sorry you've been kept waiting so long, but my uncle isn't very well this morning. I'm Jill Gessling, by the way.
On the phone, he said it was very urgent, Miss Gessling.
I know, but he isn't at all well. He suffers from a heart condition, you know, and he must avoid excitement. Please be very careful not to upset him.
Of course.
If you'll come this way.
Thank you. She led us to the back of the house and into a book-lined room which had no more light in it than the Chinese bazaar we'd just left. It took me several seconds to make out the tall figure of Colonel Gessling sitting in a wing-backed armchair in front of the empty fireplace. He was sitting straight up, very stiff and controlled, and it wasn't until later, after we'd left him, that I realized what was wrong with him. His niece hovered over him for a moment and then went out, saying as she passed me,
You'll remember what I said?
Of course. Colonel Gessling,
I knew this was going to happen. I knew that Herbert Truscott would bring nothing but evil to Barton Medworth if he persisted with this venture. I did everything I could to stop him building the plant here.
Yes, I know that, but...
It could only result in evil. I tried to tell him that, but he wouldn't listen. He called me a crank. He has only one idea, to make money. Now a man is dead, and Herbert Truscott is responsible.
Why do you say that?
You need look no further, Mr. Odell. You're a private detective. You're investigating a mystery, but there is no mystery. Herbert Truscott is guilty, as much as if he had strangled Dr. Carswood with his own 2 hands. It's your duty to bring that to the attention of the authorities.
The authorities would need proof, Colonel Gessling.
Herbert Truscott is a very wicked man. He lives an evil life. Ask him about his wife, Mr. Odell. Ask him about the evil in his private life. All lies and deceit. Nothing he says has the clean breath of truth in it. Herbert Truscott is a very wicked man. You ought to talk to Ken Armstrong, too.
What does he know?
He is not a wicked man, simple but not wicked. Ask him what he saw in the void last night. Ask him that.
Do you know what happened?
Ask Ken Armstrong. The truth is in him. It isn't in Herbert Truscott. Herbert Truscott is a very wicked man. He lives in an evil way.
He rambled on in this strain for another 10 minutes, until finally Jill Gessling came back into the room and signed us to leave. We followed her out.
You mustn't pay too much attention to what he says, Mr. Odell. He's inclined to ramble a bit on his bad days.
He sounded quite different when he spoke to me on the phone. He sounded quite normal then.
These bouts descend on him without warning, I'm afraid. I'm going to take him away for a change of air.
When?
This evening.
You going for long?
I'm not sure.
Well, I wouldn't take him too far, Miss Gessling.
Why not?
A man died last night. It may turn out to be a case of murder. Your uncle knows something about it. He'll need to give evidence.
My uncle knows nothing about it. Good morning.
Well, what did you think of all that?
The old boy was drugged.
Drugged?
Yeah, it only just hit me. It accounts for everything. Somebody found out that he'd sent for me and got to work on him with the old hypodermic needle before he could spill what it was he was going to spill. Well, he was well and truly doped, Heather. Some kind of hypnotic. Didn't you notice that he never gave a direct answer to any question I asked? Just went on saying things as though he had learnt them off by heart.
So what he was going to tell you would point to the person who killed Carswood?
You'd think so. At least we've got a lead to that person. Do you remember the old boy said, "You're a private detective"? Now, how did he know that? Only Truscott and Hugh Chalk know. Oh, and Wynne Craxton.
Well, that establishes a contact between the colonel and one of those 3.
Or all 3 of them. Well, we may not be making much progress. Not in a straight line, that is, but we're learning something. The next thing is to find out from Ken Armstrong what happened in the void during last night.
Oh, what's all that?
What's all what?
Down there. All those people. Look, there's been an accident.
Somebody's been run over. He's still lying in the road.
The policeman is signing you to stop.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir. This street's closed for the time being. There's been an accident.
Oh? Somebody killed?
I'm afraid so. We're just waiting for the ambulance.
What happened?
Well, as far as I can make out, he came out of that tobacconist on the corner there, went across the street. The car came round there, travelling very fast, and hit him full on. Ran right over him.
Did the car stop?
No, sir. But we have a description of the driver.
Do you mind if I take a look?
Not at all. You, think you might know the man, sir?
I might.
Stand aside down. Gangway, if you please. Do you know him, sir?
Yes. I know him. You're sure he's dead?
Quite sure. Death was practically instantaneous, I'd say. Would you mind giving me his name, sir?
His name was Kenneth Armstrong. Your car's here, all right. Where's the light switch?
All right. I'll get it. Well, have you found anything?
Come over here. Look. There, on top of the bonnet.
What is it?
Blood, Barbara. The time had now come when we had to go to the law. Or so I saw it. Herbert Truscott saw it somewhat differently.
I don't want the police, Odell. I don't want them at any price. I'm a law-abiding man, but I'm not prepared to overdo it. Can you imagine what the police are like in a one-horse place like Barton Medworth? No, Odell. If we call the police in now, we might as well give up the ghost.
This revived briefly the tiny twinge of suspicion I'd felt when Herbert Truscott had first hired me to work for him. The feeling that he was holding something back. But I stored that away for future reference and addressed myself to the task of getting him to see some sense. Outwardly, of course, there was no connection between the deaths of David Carswood and Ken Armstrong. Neither was overtly a case of murder. Carswood had died of infection by paralyzing virus. Armstrong from the attentions of a hit-and-run motorist. That's how it looked. But I didn't share Truscott's oversimplified and outmoded opinion of the police in rural areas. I wasn't prepared to bet much on their not being able to connect the two cases and get them both to add up to murder. And then they'd hurled the book at us for not having taken them into our confidence, especially at me. However, Truscott resisted like a kicking steer. He didn't want the police at any price. Well, finally, we beat out a compromise. We would take it to the coroner for Barton Medworth and act on his advice. The Queen's coroner for Barton Medworth turned out to be a short, bouncy little character who looked more like a comic's feed than a member of a learned profession. He enhanced this impression by a nervous mannerism which caused him to give off with a high-pitched giggle at the most unexpected moments. I fixed up an appointment with him for the same afternoon. When we went into his office, there was a tall, distinguished-looking man in a dark blue uniform with him. The coroner introduced him.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This is Superintendent Manley. He's the senior police officer in this part of the county. His advice is invaluable.
Truscott turned a livid glare on me, as though I'd stuck a knife between his shoulder blades, and for a moment there I thought he was going to turn on his heel and stomp out. It hovered in the balance for a few seconds, but the superintendent applied some quiet but very potent charm, and he subsided into a chair. And then we got down to business. I took the first solo, giving them a brief rundown of the affair to date, starting with Truscott hiring me to investigate the production blow-ups in his influenza vaccine plant at Barton Medworth, and ending up with the death of Ken Armstrong. I wasn't in particularly good voice. The coroner's giggles threw me out quite a bit, but I got most of it across. There was a pause while the superintendent and the coroner got it arranged in their minds, and then the coroner said,
Now, your contention, Mr. Odell, is that these two deaths occurred in
Suspicious circumstances?
No, but we think they might be connected, or Odell does.
What do you think, Manley?
I think Mr. Odell is right. Also, I think he was right to come to you. But I imagine Mr. Odell goes somewhat deeper in his thinking.
He has theories, Superintendent, nothing else.
Quite so, Mr. Truscott, but this is an informal meeting. There's nothing official about it. Or so I understand from the coroner.
Quite right. Quite right. Around the table discussion. We all have the same objective, to get at the truth. Now, Mr. Odell, are you suggesting that these two men were murdered?
I think it's very probable. Dr. Carswood died of a virus infection.
Appeared to die of a virus infection.
He did, Mr. Truscott. The county pathologist gave me his post-mortem report over the telephone just before you arrived. There was a contaminating virus present in the spinal cord, which caused paralysis of the lungs. A virus of the influenza spectrum.
There goes my £750,000.
Go on, Mr. Odell.
Well, there you have it. Somebody wanted to ruin Mr. Truscott. First he tried fouling up the production process, but presumably this wasn't fast enough, so he gave Carswood a fatal dose of virus. Carswood was a well-known scientist, winner of the Nobel Prize. His death would attract a lot of attention. If the inquest found that he'd died because of a faulty vaccine, that would make headline news. The Ministry of Health would then step in and withdraw the license to manufacture the vaccine.
And I'd be flat bust.
I see. And the man who was run over, Ken Armstrong, how does he tie in?
He had some vital information about the way David Carswood died. Maybe even the identity of the murderer.
And he was run over before he could pass it on?
Yes.
By the murderer?
As I see it.
Well, gentlemen, it's a very dreadful business, very dreadful. First-rate scientist like Carswood, great loss to the country. But how was he killed? How was he infected by the virus?
I have a theory about that, sir.
He's bristling with theories.
I found this a few hours after Carswood died.
What is it?
A broken ampoule, similar to those the vaccine sealed in. I found it in the void above the test room Carswood was working in at the time of his collapse. It was near the air conditioning unit.
Your idea is that the virus was fed into the air conditioning?
Yes. The outlet duct is right above the table at which he was working.
My bacteriology isn't very strong, but the vaccine is held in a liquid suspension. Even if it had been activated and the virus alive, surely the air current in the conditioner wouldn't have been strong enough to carry it in heavy liquid particles.
There was a booster fan in the shaft just above the test room.
Did you examine the inlet duct?
I did, Superintendent. There was no sign of moisture.
That rather disposes of your ingenious theory, doesn't it?
No, not necessarily. The virus might not have been in liquid suspension.
It could have been in a gas?
Yes.
Is that scientifically sound?
I don't know. I think it's worth going into, though.
Well, we could do it in our lab over at the plant. We have a couple of the top bacteriologists in the country on our staff, Wynne Craxton and Martin Dayson.
You want to go on with your own investigations?
Well, we're properly equipped.
Well, I've no objection, if the coroner hasn't.
We'd better do this properly. In the normal way, I'd hold an inquest on Carswood sometime tomorrow. But if the superintendent makes a formal request for an adjournment pending further investigation, I'll postpone. That'll give you a chance to find out the truth and save your large investment, Mr. Trescott.
I'm much obliged to you, sir.
There's just one more thing. I shall have to make this an official matter now. Bristol will probably send down a man from our forensic lab to work with your people.
I think it's preposterous, a waste of time. However poor David inhaled that virus, it couldn't have been by somebody dropping it into the air conditioning. That's too fantastic. It's like something in a horror comic.
Have you an alternative theory, Dr. Craxton?
No, I haven't. It isn't certain that David was infected by ingestion.
Oh, yes, it is. The post-mortem report is out.
Oh, I see. When's the inquest to be held?
The coroner has agreed to an adjournment to enable us to investigate further.
You mean he swallowed your ridiculous theory?
I don't know. He agreed to an adjournment.
What about the police? What do they say?
They've agreed to our investigating. They're sending one of their scientific people from Bristol.
Well, I don't know how we're going to set about it. It's like being asked to start from the premise that the Earth is flat.
What do you think, Dr. Dayson?
There might be something in it.
Oh, now, Martin.
The ampoule you found in the void, have you still got it?
Yes, it's here. It hasn't been handled. It's been in this box all the time.
Thank you. Well, we'll have a try.
You want me to work on it too, Mr. Truscott?
Well, David Carswood was your closest friend, Wynne. Don't you want to find his murderer?
Well, of course I do. But I must tell you that in my professional opinion, there is nothing in Odell's theory, nothing at all. I want to make that clear from the start.
You've already made it abundantly clear.
All right, we'll leave you to it. The sooner we get to the bottom of this, the sooner we can get back into production with the vaccine.
By the way, Mr. Trescott, there are certain matters of administration that need attending to. The staff are beginning to ask questions.
Oh.
They want to know when we're going to start up again. If we're going to start up again. And there's a rumor going around that Hugh Chalk is no longer director of the operation.
He isn't. He resigned.
I see. Then who's in charge when you're not here?
Will you take it on?
If you want me to.
I'd appreciate it. We can adjust the matter of salary later on.
Are we just driving around Barton Medworth, or are we going somewhere in particular?
If you must know, Angel, we're going to a tobacconist called Twists at the end of Monk's Way.
Oh, I get it. The tobacconist Ken Armstrong came out of when he was knocked down and killed.
The very same.
Do you happen to have looked in the rear-view mirror recently?
Now, look, Heather, if you're going to give me one of these safer driving lectures...
There's a grey car behind you.
Yes, you see that?
There's a man in a grey hat driving it.
I see that, too. Do you suppose he bought the car to match his hat, or the hat to match the car?
He's been behind us ever since we left Truscott House.
Has he?
And he stayed there during the 2 shambling circuits of the town you've just made.
The idea you're trying to get across is that he's following us.
Either that, or he's got hooked onto our rear bumper.
Well, here's Twists. Look, make a couple more shambling circuits while I'm inside and see if Grey Hat stays with you.
Right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Are you Mr. Twist?
I am.
There was a man knocked down and killed right outside your shop.
Yes, Mr. Armstrong. He worked at Truscott's.
Did you see the accident, Mr. Twist?
Yes, I did.
Well, I'm a private investigator working for Truscott's. I'd be grateful for anything you can tell me.
Well, Mr. Armstrong went out of the shop and started to cross the street. The car came round the corner from Market Street. It was going very fast. He had no time to get out of the way. It hit him full on.
Did the car stop?
No, it accelerated and disappeared round into Abbey Street.
Did you get the number?
No, I was completely shocked. Besides, my first thought was for Mr. Armstrong. I ran out into the street to help him. But, of course, there was nothing to be done.
The driver must have seen him.
Unless she was blind.
She?
Yes, a woman was driving. I did have time to notice that.
A young woman?
I couldn't say. She was going so fast. All I had time for was to register the fact that she was a woman.
And the car?
A red sports car, a German make.
I see. Well, thanks, Mr. Twist. You've been very helpful.
Do you want to drive?
Nope. How about Grey Hat?
He's still there. Behind that van.
He isn't what you'd call unobtrusive about it, is he?
You want to go and take it up with him?
No, it might turn out that he's fascinated by you.
Odell, what a nice thing to say.
Well, you're not exactly unobtrusive yourself, you know. Not in that green dress. Come on, let's get going.
Where to now?
Back to Trescott House. It's nearly 7 o'clock, and I could use some dinner.
Okay.
The man in the gray hat followed us all the way back to Trescott House. Then, having seen us go in the front door, he drove off. After dinner, we went down to the common room. Actually, this consisted of 3 rooms. A reading and writing room where silence was golden, a card room where silence was relative, and a room with TV, record player, and dancing space where silence was non-existent. These 3 recreational rooms divided the Truscott staff neatly right down the middle. The under-30s were rarely seen in the card or reading rooms, while the over-30s were rarely seen around the record player, which was on incessantly from dinner to bedtime. It was the latter Heather and I picked, and when we went in, a Charlie Parker-inspired alto man was giving out with the blue notes, backed by a gently rocking rhythm group. We ordered a couple of beers and sat listening.
Do you like this music, Odell?
Yep, I do.
Why?
It talks to me.
What about?
Oh, I don't know. About trains rushing through the night. Dark rivers flowing through lighted cities. being alone and sad, but with a beautiful, exciting kind of sadness. Lonely hotel rooms, neon signs flashing across the street, people that go by you wrapped in the mystery of their own lives. That kind of stuff. City stuff. But this music doesn't belong here in Barton Medworth, with bugs and glass tubes and men struck down by some ice-cold maniac. Come on, let's go out in the garden.
All right, there's no need to get so violent. Let me finish my drink.
Oh, it's too late. Here comes Dr. Chalk.
What's he doing in here? This music isn't his cup of tea, surely.
I wouldn't have thought so.
A square?
For sure.
Evening, Odell.
Good evening.
Mara, mind if I join you?
No, not at all. Can I get you something?
No, thanks. Ah, jump number. Miss McMara, would you care to dance? You don't mind, Odell?
No, not at all. This is something I'd pay to see.
Keep an eye on my bag.
He led her onto the floor and then went into the most proficient engine-turn jive you ever saw. No rock and roller in jeans and white buckskins could have given it more or done better. He writhed through it as though his joints were all floating in lubricating oil. Hugh Chalk, the severe, tight-lipped intellectual, a dedicated man of science with a monastic air, jiving. An announcement that Elvis was to sing the lead in Madame Butterfly couldn't have been a greater surprise. Well, I was still in the process of getting my wind back when a voice sounded behind me.
Lost your girl?
Huh? Oh, hello, Miss Ulrich. Won't you join us?
Didn't we agree on Barbara?
Okay.
Who's a surprising man, don't you think?
He doesn't do sword swallowing as well, does he?
Perhaps. Can you desert your post for a few moments? She's quite safe. Apart from the risk of a broken leg or two, of course.
What had you in mind?
A walk in the garden. It's quite a warm evening.
Fine. Yeah, I'd like to. Oh, I'd better take Heather's handbag.
I've been thinking what you said to me in David Carswood's room.
What particular aspect of it?
About me showing I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I am afraid, Philip. I'm terrified.
Why?
David was murdered, wasn't he?
Well, I think so.
And so was Ken Armstrong. 2 murders. Do you think it's going to stop there, Philip? I don't. I think there'll be a third.
Who do you think the third will be?
Me. Wouldn't you be afraid?
Yeah, I would. Barbara, you own a German sports car, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And it's red.
That's right.
Ken Armstrong was knocked down and killed by a woman driving a red German sports car.
You think I did it?
I don't know. I'm asking you to tell me.
How do you know that a woman was driving it, I mean?
There was an eyewitness.
The tobacconist?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't me. I haven't seen my car since yesterday morning.
Somebody took it?
They must have done, if it's the one that killed Ken.
Well, where is it now?
In the garage. At least I think it is.
Okay, let's go and see it. Your car's here, all right. Where's the light switch?
All right, I'll get it. Well, have you found anything?
Come over here. Look. There, on top of the bonnet.
What? What is it?
Blood, Barbara. Come on, steady.
It's all right. Just give me your arm.
All right, now, come on. Out into the air.
I know you. I knew it. I dreaded it, but I knew it.
You're trying to tell me that you knocked him down and then...
No. What I told you is the truth. I haven't seen that car since yesterday morning.
Can you prove that?
I don't know. Maybe if I think hard, I can account for all my movements.
What about the mileage? Do you keep a record of it?
No.
So the car could have been taken out of there and driven around, you'd be none the wiser.
That's right. Philip, I'm not the only person who uses that garage. 3 other cars are kept in there. 3 other people have keys.
Who are they?
Hugh Chalk, Win Crexton, Martin Derson.
One of them could have taken it.
Of course. I always leave the ignition key in her when she's in the garage.
Feel better now?
Yes. Thank you. The ground has stopped rocking.
Okay. Let's walk back to the house. Take my arm and we'll walk slowly.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. Technically, I should report this immediately to the cops. They're in on it since this afternoon, you know.
They'll arrest me?
Work it out for yourself. Your car, the blood, the tobacconist evidence that a woman was driving.
But I wasn't, Philip. I swear I wasn't.
Okay. Take it easy.
You don't believe me, do you?
Well, I'm trying hard. It isn't easy. It hasn't been easy to believe you, Barbara, ever since I found you going through David Carswood's papers.
I suppose not. I told you told me to do it. I imagine you checked with him.
I did. I'm not the greatest investigator in the world, but I'm not a complete nincompoop. I usually check people's statements.
Philip, please believe me. I know I've behaved foolishly. I know I tried to fool you. I wanted to find out what you knew about David's death, and You're beginning to believe me, aren't you? You want to believe me, don't you?
Look, Barbara, I think you're a very lovely woman. I have a number of crazy impulses bursting through my head at this very moment, brought on by listening to jazz, the fine weather, the garden, and most of all by your hand on my arm. I could very easily make a prize ass out of myself. But I want to play this with my head, Barbara. It'll be much more useful for you in the end if I do.
All right. I'll take my hand away.
Thanks. I don't believe you killed Ken Armstrong.
Thank you.
Maybe it's your pretty face getting in the way, but I'm going to take a chance on it that it's not being that. Had you killed Armstrong, I doubt very much if you'd gone straight back and left your car sitting in the garage. I doubt very much if you'd have used your own car, even. Even so, with Twist's evidence, plus that blood on the bonnet, the cops would be bound to put you in the cooler if they knew.
I see that.
And here's another thing, Barbara. Twist will have told his story to the police. They'll be working through the list, checking on all the people in the country who own red German sports cars. Sooner or later, they're going to wind up knocking on your door. So whatever we do, we have to do it fast.
Whatever you say, Philip. I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Okay. You can start off by telling me what you were really doing going through David Carswood's papers.
Must I tell you that?
Look, you want me to take a chance on you, Barbara. If it comes out that I didn't go at once to the police, I can have my license taken away.
All right. I'm sorry, I'll tell you. I was looking for a letter. Several letters.
What kind of letters?
Ah, there you are. Odell, I brought Heather back to you, slightly out of breath, but otherwise unscathed.
Have you got my bag, Odell?
Yes,
Well, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Barbara, we have an appointment to play bridge. We're already 10 minutes late.
But I was talking to...
I'm sure Odell will excuse you.
No, please, cancel the bridge.
Oh, that's all right, Barbara. You go along. When will you be finished?
About 11. We usually pack up then.
Well, I'll see you at 11 then, Barbara. Where'll you be?
In my room.
Okay, I'll give you a knock at 11.
I'll be there. You can rely on that.
Thanks.
Oh. Assignations now, huh?
Nothing like that, Heather.
No? You're going to her room to discuss Far Eastern crisis.
No, I am not. While you've been jiving in there with that rock and roll bacteriologist, I've been putting in some solid work.
I could see that. From the tender glances she gave you.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, Heather, what do you think I am? A guy who can't resist a beautiful woman.
That's exactly the kind of guy I think you are. Exactly.
Now, listen, Heather, Barbara Oyrich
Oh,
is...
save your breath. Here comes the great white chief.
Oh, Odell, I've been looking all over the place for you.
Oh, he's been taking a little relaxation, Mr. Truscott.
Oh.
Even Odell is human. All too pathetically human. Oh, excuse me. I have to go make some repairs to my face.
Very attractive girl.
Yeah. Wish I could say the same for her mind. Did you want to talk to me about something, Mr. Trescott?
Aye, I suddenly remembered. You went over to see Colonel Gessling, didn't you? He rang up and said he had something important to tell you. Did you go?
I did.
What happened?
Nothing. Somebody got at him with a hypodermic needle before I got there.
Drugged him, you mean?
He was so full it was running out of his ears. He talked a lot, most of it nonsense, repeated himself endlessly.
What did he say?
That you were responsible for David Carswood's death. I thought you'd find it funny.
What? You don't think there's anything in it, do you?
I don't know, Mr. Trescott. In this game, it's the reverse of British law court procedure. Everyone is guilty until they're proved innocent.
Ah, it's ridiculous. Why would I kill David Carswood?
Why would anyone?
Look, I told you, Gessling is a crank. He did everything he could to stop me building the vaccine plant in Barton Medworth.
I know, but just the same, he knows or appears to know quite a lot about what goes on behind the scenes here. For instance, he knew I was working in the plant a couple of days after I arrived. Knew my name, too.
How did he know that?
I don't know. He said I was to ask you about your wife. My wife? That's what he said. Ask Mr. Truscott about his wife. You'll find all the answers there.
He's daft. My wife's dead.
When did she die, Mr. Truscott?
2 years ago.
Mr. Truscott, the car's here.
Oh, thanks. I'm flying to Manchester tonight, consulting with my lawyers, getting into deep waters now,
You can say that again.
I'll be back sometime tomorrow. Carry on, Odell. Keep up the good work.
Heather, what does your feminine intuition tell you about our friend, Mr. Trescott? That he's an honest, upright, and truthful citizen?
My feminine intuition isn't that much offbeat. Show me a man who is honest, upright, and truthful, and don't point at yourself. I can't even get up to do a stately minuet without you making assignations with a beautiful young
Come
woman.
on, don't let's get the needle stuck in that groove again.
Oh, where are we going?
For a drive. It's a nice night. I feel like driving.
You're very quiet.
I'm thinking.
About 11 o'clock?
No. What do you think I am, an erotic he-goat? Now, don't answer that. I was thinking. Now, the person who murdered Carswood must have considerable scientific knowledge, since he did it in such a way as to baffle a couple of the country's top bacteriologists. Buy that?
I do.
Okay. Now, we can draw up a list from that. Craxton and Derson, Hugh Chalk, Colonel Gessling.
Colonel Gessling?
Well, he's a retired doctor. He could have specialized in bugs, for all we know. And then there's Herbert Truscott.
Oh, he's a businessman.
Quite so, but he's been in drugs for more than 20 years. He must have picked up quite a bit of technical knowledge. Okay, 5 people.
You could add Barbara Eurick to the list. She's been around vaccines for some time. Or does she get out because of her figure?
6, then. Motives? The Colonel's is obvious. He's been against Truscott coming here from the start. He's rabidly anti-vaccine. Chalk and Craxton hate Truscott. They don't actually come out and say so, but it's obvious. Derson? No motive for him yet. Ditto Truscott.
And Miss Eurick. Although you could say that a woman who looks like her could always be in and around murder.
You've really got her on the brain, haven't you?
Haven't you?
No. Drayton Green, 3/4 of a mile. How about we pay a call on the Colonel?
He won't be there. His niece said she was taking him away.
Well, maybe we could get into the house. By the way, we haven't seen the man in the gray hat again, have we?
No. Unless his shadowing technique's improving.
It has a long way to go. The Gessling house was in darkness. Nobody came in answer to our ring. We went round to the back. Nothing there, no light, no sound. The garage was behind the house, separated from it by a cobbled yard. There was a 2-story building which had once been a stable. We went over and tried the door. That opened.
Nice ghostly sound.
Anything so modern as electric light around here, I wonder?
Just a minute. I think it... yes.
Well, the car's gone.
She did take him away, then.
Seems like it. I wonder what's up here.
Why don't we go and look?
We went up the flight of rickety wooden stairs which led to the upper floor. A little more fumbling around, and then we had light. The upper floor was fitted out as a small lab, with a bench, retorts, burners, microscope, and so on. We looked at it in silence for a moment, and then Heather said,
You're right. The Colonel does specialize in bugs.
Come and have a look at this.
An ampoule of vaccine.
The Truscott influenza vaccine, too. It's stamped with a serial number.
Listen. There's somebody downstairs.
Turn the light off, quick.
He's coming up here.
Heather and I didn't do much in the way of breathing during the next few seconds. We stood there in the darkness, listening to the footsteps mounting the wooden stairs, their sound amplified by the utter silence of the night. Finally, they reached the top, and then the door opened. The light went on, blinding us momentarily. And then we were looking at the man in the gray hat. The man who had spent the greater part of the day following us around Barton Medworth. He was about medium height, built like a box, with a completely round head and a pair of pale eyes that were like two pieces of smoked glass. He let the eyes rest on us stolidly for some moments, and then he spoke.
Have you two got any authority to be on these premises?
Have you?
Beg pardon, miss?
Have you any authority to be here?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have, miss. Authority of Colonel Gessling himself.
Why have you been following us?
Ah, you noticed that, did you?
We couldn't very well miss it.
You couldn't have been more obtrusive if you'd been in a Churchill tank.
Worst bit of following I've ever seen.
I'm surprised to hear you say that. I really am. Shadowing people's part of my professional activity, as you might say.
Maybe you had an off day.
Might well be. The name's Fazakerley, by the way.
You're kidding.
Fred Fazakerley, private inquiry agent, Broad Street, Manchester, established 1938. Why don't we all relax?
Yes, why don't we do that?
Anybody got a cigarette? I've run out.
Here.
Thanks. Is something likely to blow up if I sit on this bench?
Well, you're closer to Colonel Gessling than we are, Mr. Fazakerley.
Fred. Fazakerley's too much of a blooming mouthful for a busy man.
You're so right.
And we're both busy men, Mr. Odell, aren't we? Especially you, Mr. Odell. Oh, well, I'll chance it.
Chance what?
Sitting on the bench. Well, nothing happened. All this scientific equipment scares the wits out of me. Strictly non-scientific, that's me.
What exactly does Colonel Gessling do in this lab?
I don't know. I was never in here before.
I understood you to say you were acting with his authority.
I am, miss, but I don't know what he does with his spare time or what he keeps over his garage. Anyhow, we have some talking to do. I know what you're on, Mr. Odell.
Do you?
Aye, and it's very dangerous ground, let me tell you that. 2 people been murdered, and it won't stop there. Not unless me and you look slippy.
Hold it a minute, Fred. Are you proposing some sort of partnership?
A pooling of resources, let's put it like that.
Okay, let's put it like that. Well, what's your angle?
Old Herbert J. Truscott's paying you a nice bit of money, isn't he? Somewhere around 5,000 quid.
You're a better detective than your shadowing would suggest, Fred.
Good at me job. Lot of folk think that because I've got a face like a cabbage, I've got no brains. I'm smart, let me tell you that. 5,000 quid.
If I deliver.
If you find who murdered David Carswood, you mean?
Right.
And why?
Right again.
Okay, I can give you the answers to both of them.
Provided I cut you in on the 5,000.
But I won't cut you too hard.
How hard?
500.
It's reasonable. What are you selling?
What's in this notebook? Research into the private life of David Carswood. Is it a deal?
It's a deal.
Right. Colonel Gessling come to me 18 months ago when Trescots announced their plan to build the influenza vaccine plant in Barton Medworth. He wanted to stop 'em building it.
I know that.
The Colonel hired me to make inquiries into Herbert Truscott's private life.
Hoping that you'd come up with something he could use to blackmail Truscott into not building.
Oh, nobody said anything about blackmail, Miss McMara. Fred Fazakerley always works on the right side of the law. I'd like you to remember that, please.
I'll remember that, forgive me.
Well, the first thing I found out about Herbert Truscott was that he was having wife trouble.
When was this?
18 months ago, beginning of 57.
Truscott told me his wife died 2 years ago.
You believe everything he tells you?
No. Go ahead.
Well, finally, Mrs. Truscott moved out and into a flat by herself. She was visited there by David Carswood. She also visited his rooms. This continued for 7 months.
Then what happened?
Well, Carswood went to New York to attend a conference. He was away a month. Then he spent 3 weeks in the south of France. Mrs. Truscott spent the same 3 weeks in the south of France.
Where they posed as man and wife?
Now, Miss McMara, I never said that. I never go beyond the facts.
You must have a very dull time.
On his return, Carswood left for Barton Medworth to take up his work with the influenza vaccine unit.
And Mrs. Truscott?
I don't know. At that point, I gave up the case.
Why?
Colonel Gessling stopped paying me. The plant was open. I hadn't found anything that could stop it, and there, so far as I was concerned, the matter ended. But the day before yesterday, Colonel Gessling rang me up on the telephone, told me about Carswood's death, said he wanted me to resume work. He told me to come and see him this morning. When I got here, he was out, and now he's gone away with that niece of his.
I see. Who put you on to me?
He did. The Colonel. He told me you were working for Truscott.
Did he? You started this, Fred, by saying that you could tell me who killed David Carswood and why.
Well, isn't it obvious?
No, I can't say that it is.
Odell never goes beyond the facts, Fred.
Here, now, look. I told you all this in good faith. I heard you was a man of your word, and now you're trying to back out.
No, Fred, no, I'm not. I'll work on the information you've given me. And if it leads me somewhere, I'll pay $500.
Is your idea that Truscott murdered Carswood?
Who else? Oldest motive in the world. Jealousy. Truscott was in love with his wife.
We'll bear that in mind. Fred, tell me, where's Mrs. Truscott now?
I have no idea. But I can give you her address in Manchester, 38 Windermere Towers. It's a block of flats.
What does she look like?
Mrs. Truscott? Well, now, let's see. She's tall and dark and, you know, like this.
Shapely?
Ah, shapely. Much younger than Truscott, about, 27, 28.
Mm-hmm. Are you staying in the district?
I have a room at the Royal Oak. I had a mind to stay around till the Colonel comes back, keeping an eye open, you know.
Mm. Well, we'll keep in touch. You know where I am if you want to find me, don't you?
Oh, Truscott House.
Come on, Heather. It's nearly 11 o'clock.
Right. Oh, do you want me to bring this ampoule?
Which ampoule?
The influenza vaccine.
Oh, sure. Yeah, bring it.
In a hurry, isn't he?
He has a date with a woman who looks like Sophia Loren.
Oh, does that ampoule belong to the Colonel, Miss McMara?
No, it belongs to Trescots.
Well, what's he doing here, then?
Maybe the Colonel was doing some experiments with it. You see, Fred, David Carswood was killed with an active flu virus.
Oh.
Perhaps the Colonel got tired of waiting for you to come up with something and decided to get Truscotts to close down himself.
You mean Colonel Gessling killed Carswood?
I've got to fly, Fred. If you could see her, you'd understand why he's in such a hurry.
Well, Heather, what do you think of Fred Zachary?
I agree with him.
That Truscott killed Carswood?
No, that his face is like a cabbage. One of those red cabbages you make borsch out of.
Heather, you make borsch out of beetroot.
Oh, I could have sworn...
Heather, you know what I'm going to do to you.
Yes. You're going to knock on Barbara Oirich's door at 11 o'clock.
I'm going to send you back to London if you can't take this case seriously, Heather. 2 men have died, decent, useful citizens. They were murdered, Heather. Well, haven't you anything to say about that?
Yes, I have. You're in a bad state, Odell. You're running yourself into the ground, aren't you?
No, I am not. All I'm objecting to is the fact that...
You're losing your sense of humor. That only means one thing. You're running yourself into the ground.
Look, murder isn't a joke.
No, but losing your sense of humor is murder.
Very clever.
Oh, look, you've told me this before, Odell, often. A sense of humor is a sense of balance. You can't do anything without a sense of balance. Least of all, pick your way through a lot of conflicting cross-currents that usually collect around murder.
I'm sorry. You're right.
What's troubling you? Want to tell Mum?
I lost my sense of humor. It's that simple. I've also lost my way, Heather. 1 minute I think I have it, the threads that's going to unravel and lead me to the truth, and then it's gone the next minute. And I have another thread in my fat, stupid hands.
May I give you some advice?
Sure, I could use some.
Okay. There's a book written by a French aviator. I can't remember his name. He said that there are times in life when the only thing to do is to put one foot in front of the other.
Okay. The bell is duly rung. I pursue one line of investigation until I reach the end. I stop darting from one to the other like a mixed-up grasshopper. Is that it?
Well, before we went into that lab in Colonel Gessling's garage and met with jolly Fred Zachary, you were convinced that Barbara Oirich could lead you to the truth. Well, all right. You're seeing her in a few minutes. Stay with her till the end.
But I wasn't going to see Barbara Oirich in a few minutes. When we got back to Truscott House at precisely 7 minutes past 11 o'clock, there was no answer to my knock. I tried her door, but it was locked. Meanwhile, Heather had gone to bed, and there wasn't anyone to discuss this with. I didn't feel like going to bed and thought I'd take a walk in the garden. To get there, I had to pass through the common room. As I approached the end room where the record player was, a cool blues came wafting towards me. The room was empty except for one person, sitting close to the record player. Hugh Chalk. He looked up as I went up to him. There were tears in his eyes. He turned his head away quickly, took off his glasses, and hurriedly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And then he blew his nose.
Hello, Odell. How are things with you?
All mixed up. And with you?
Oh, roughly about the same.
And if I kill this?
I thought you were an aficionado.
I am, but I feel low enough without help from the authorities.
Because Barbara has gone.
She has gone, then?
Yes. Shortly after we left you in the garden. The moment we got inside the house, she said, "Hugh, I can't play bridge. I'd go mad if you made me. You've got to cancel it." So I went off and cancelled it. She went up to her room. I followed her. And I met her on the stairs. She had a coat on and was carrying a suitcase.
Did she say where she was going?
No.
Did she say anything?
She said she'd write to me.
And then?
She rang up for a taxi. I stayed with her until it came. And she left.
Did you hear her tell the taxi driver where to go?
Yes, to the railway station.
What did you talk about while you were waiting?
Oh, odd things. I did most of the talking.
I see. Would that be a bottle of whiskey under your chair?
It is. Will you join me?
I certainly will.
She had a way with her, hadn't she?
She certainly had.
She won't come back, you know.
Won't she?
No. Cheers.
Cheers.
No, she'll never come back. There are some women that come back, others that never do. Have you ever noticed that it's always the best ones that never come back?
Frequently.
What's your opinion of that, Odell, as a man of the world? Oh, will you fill up again?
Please. The things you can't have are always the most attractive. It starts like that in the nursery and goes on all through life. Cheers.
Cheers.
You?
Yes, Philip.
How long have you been in love with Barbara?
Excuse me.
He got up, put his head down, and practically ran out of the room. Well, that was that. I walked around the garden for an hour or more. Nothing happened, either in the garden or inside my head. Then I went to bed. I thought I wasn't going to sleep having so much in my mind, but I went off the moment my head hit the pillow, and I didn't wake up until past 8 the next morning. The moment I woke, I knew what to do. I bathed, shaved, and dressed. Then I threw a few things into a bag and went and got the car out. I left a note for Heather and started away. It was a dull, sour morning with no sign of a break in a leaden, weeping sky. I drove past the Truscott plant, and then I braked, turned round, parked, and went in. Martin Darson and Wynne Craxton were in the lab. I went over to the bench they were working at. I took the ampoule from Colonel Gessling's lab out of my pocket and dropped it on the bench.
What's that?
It looks like one of our ampoules.
It is one of our ampoules, Dr. Craxton. It contains 1 dose of the test vaccine.
The vaccine we were using when David Carswood died?
Yes.
Where did you get it?
In a room over Colonel Gessling's garage, which he has fitted out as a lab.
How did he get it?
If we knew that, we might know who killed David Carswood.
You think he got it through somebody on our staff?
How else?
But nobody on our staff knows him. Or do they?
Well, I don't think it's likely that the colonel broke in here and lifted that ampoule. And he couldn't get in any other way because Mr. Truscott gave orders that he wasn't to be admitted to the plant.
Are you saying that Gessling had something to do with David's death? That he got hold of an ampoule of the test vaccine?
2 ampoules. This one wasn't used to kill Carswood.
Oh, why should Gessling want to kill Carswood?
Gessling wanted this plant closed down.
Would he go as far as murder?
Who knows what'll drive a man as far as murder? How did he get the ampoules? That somebody smuggled them out to him seems the most likely explanation.
Somebody who was in the plot?
Maybe. On the other hand, the contact could have been through his niece, Jill. She isn't exactly a ball of fire, looks-wise, but who knows about that, too?
Well, I don't envy you your job, Odell. I'm afraid I don't have to work with anything so confusing and complex as human nature. Chemical elements can be surprising and unstable, but not so surprising or unstable as human beings.
How are you getting on with my theory?
Well, we don't think it's so absurd. At least Martin doesn't.
I don't say it's the answer we're looking for, Odell, but I think it may be pointing in that direction.
Could you lower that mask of scientific reserve and put it on the line in simple terms?
Try. Your theory is that somebody released a live virus culture into the air conditioning, directed it down into test room 8, David inhaled it and then died.
In simple terms, yes.
Well, we've given the pieces of ampoule you found a thorough examination. That ampoule did contain a live virus.
But that's wonderful. We are on the right lines, then.
Wait a minute. There was no trace of the liquid in which the vaccine is normally suspended, either on the ampoule fragments or on the inlet duct into test room 8.
Or in the air conditioning shaft.
But it is possible that the virus could have been liberated into a gaseous suspension. If that were dropped into the air conditioner, it would work out the way you envisaged.
The vaccine was made live, turned into a gas, and then released into the air conditioner. Does that work?
I don't know. No, the line I'm working on, Odell, is that something was applied to the ampoule which translated the contents into a gas.
And so far, we've had no luck.
But you feel optimistic enough to keep on trying.
I do. Wynne doesn't.
Well, the thing that balks me, Martin, as you know, is the stabilizer. David and I developed that stabilizer together. It was sound enough scientifically for David to get the Nobel Prize for it. Man, dash it all, it was the very basis of our production process. That stabilizer was so sure that it is virtually impossible to reactivate any virus culture that's once been treated with it.
I know. You've landed us into a very ironical situation, Odell. Very ironical indeed. If your theory is right and that vaccine was turned into a fatal virus, whether in liquid or gaseous suspension, then it means that there's some fundamental fault in the Carswood stabilizer.
And it wouldn't be possible to go on manufacturing the vaccine?
Not from this formula.
I see.
Perhaps you should talk to Truscott again. Ask him if he's still prepared to risk his $750,000 in order to find out how Carswood died. I think you'll find he isn't.
I'll take it up with him.
Where is he, by the way? I wanted to see him this morning, but nobody knew where he was.
He went to Manchester last night to confer with his lawyers.
Well, you'd better confer with him about this quick.
Okay, well, I'm on my way to Manchester now. Just let me see if I got this right. If you go on with your experiments, you may find out how Carswood was killed. But you may also find out that the manufacturing process is faulty.
Exactly. If we went on and released the vaccine to the public, there'd be a chance that it would become unstable and cause epidemics.
Well, I don't see that he has any choice.
Neither do I. If there is some flaw in the stabilizer, the sooner we find out, the better.
Besides, the police are sending a man from their forensic department to work with you.
Oh, he came yesterday afternoon. He said he preferred to work in his own lab. We gave him a sample of the vaccine and he went back to Bristol.
Okay, I'll tell Truscott all this.
All right, but you mark my words. You'll find he prefers his money.
One good thing about the weather, it kept people off the roads a bit. I made Manchester in reasonable time. I went straight to the head offices of the Truscott Drug Company. But Herbert J. hadn't been there. I called his house, but he hadn't been there either. Then I got on to his lawyers, Dunlop, Wickham, and Baines, and spoke to the senior partner, Mr. Russell.
No, Mr. Odell, he hasn't been here.
Well, he left Barton Medworth last night. He said he was going to consult with you, Mr. Russell.
It's the first I've heard about it.
Well, maybe he decided to take a chance on you being able to see him.
That's most unlike him. Herbert Truscott's most punctilious about making appointments. Furthermore, he knows I'm a very busy man, and that it's almost impossible to see me without an appointment.
I see. Mr. Russell, do you know where he stays in Manchester if he doesn't go to his house?
He doesn't stay anywhere. He hates hotels.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell me something about Mrs. Truscott?
Who?
Mrs. Truscott, his wife. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I can't tell you anything about her, Mr. Odell. I don't answer confidential questions over the telephone.
Could I come and see you then?
I'm afraid not. I'm entirely booked up today.
Tomorrow?
I'm entirely booked up tomorrow as well. Goodbye, Mr. Odell. I'll tell Herbert you're inquiring for him if I should see him.
Well, I was putting one foot in front of the other, all right, but I couldn't see where it was leading me. Truscott said his wife was dead. Fred Vizzackley said she was alive. Mr. Russell wouldn't say anything. Well, maybe it was all leading somewhere, but I couldn't see it. I took a cab to Windermere Towers. The door of number 38 was opened by one of those flaxen-haired, sturdy-legged girls you see in continental films. The ones who, despite their bucolic appearance, have all the complexes.
Good morning. May I do something for you?
Mrs. Truscott in.
Mrs. Truscott.
I'm a friend of hers. May I come in? Thanks. It's a nice room. Plenty of light, air, and money. It smells of money. It's a nice smell, don't you think?
Who are you?
A man named Philip Odell. Are you the maid?
I work here, yes.
You're doing what?
I keep the apartment clean. What do you want?
What's your name?
Paula.
Where do you come from, Paula?
Switzerland, Zurich. I'm in England to learn the language.
Manchester's a great place to learn English.
What do you want, please?
I want to talk to Mrs. Truscott.
She's not here.
When will she be back?
I don't know.
Was she here last night?
No, she wasn't here last night.
When are you expecting her?
Please?
When will she be here?
I cannot tell you.
You mean you won't tell me?
I do not know.
You're here to learn English, huh? Well, you're doing all right, Paula.
Thank you.
You've learned how to tell a lie, but not all that efficiently. I went out, found another cab, and told the driver to park across the street from Windermere Towers. We sat there for an hour. Then Mrs. Truscott came out and got into a black chauffeur-driven limousine. We went after it, and it led us out to the airport. The chauffeur carried a couple of bags in after her and checked them at the baggage counter, and then he drove off alone. I paid off my cab and went into the airport building. Mrs. Truscott was in the restaurant, sitting in front of a pot of coffee and looking very, very pale. I went over and sat down at her table.
Hello?
Mrs. Truscott.
Paula told me you called. Cup of coffee?
Thanks.
You're angry with me, aren't you?
No. I like people to fool me, tell me lies.
I didn't tell you any lies. White?
Please. 2 lumps. You didn't tell me you were married to Herbert Truscott.
You didn't ask? My maiden name is Ulrich, and I was a statistician before I married. I took back both when our marriage broke up. Coffee all right?
Thanks. Why didn't you tell me you were involved with David Carswood?
Involved? What's that supposed to mean?
I can put it more bluntly if you like.
I thought I was in love with David. He thought he was in love with me. We made a mistake. We then called it a day. All right?
Did your husband know?
Yes, I told him.
How did he take it?
I don't see what this...
Barbara, David Carswood was murdered. There has to be a motive. Jealousy is high on the list of motives for murder.
Herbert murdered David?
Isn't that what you think?
No, of course it isn't. Herbert's a civilized man.
Then why were you going through Carswood's papers the morning after he died? You were looking for something that would reveal your connection with him, love letters that you had written him, for instance, so that you could destroy them and turn the heat off Herbert.
I might have been wanting to turn the heat off myself. My car ran Ken Armstrong down and killed him. His blood was on it. How do you know I didn't kill them both?
I don't know. But I'll tell you something, Barbara. If you skip the country, which I imagine is what you're planning to do, then you're really in trouble. I can stop you doing that, you know. There's a policeman outside in the hall.
But you're not going to do it, are you?
No, I'm not.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to take you back to Barton Medworth.
Oh, no.
Listen, it's the best thing to do. You must be able to see that. Leaving that country will do no good, Barbara. They can pick you up anywhere along the air lanes. Easiest thing in the world. And then you'll be in an even worse mess.
But if we go back to Barton Medworth, they'll arrest me.
Yes, they probably will, but it's a long way off being able to prove that you killed anyone.
And if you hand me over to the police, then you could collect your fee, couldn't you? Well, couldn't you?
Yes, I dare say I could.
You still want me to come with you?
I do.
All right. I will. You pay for the coffee while I make a phone call. I'll have to stop at Windermere Towers and pick up some things, and I want to be sure Paula will be there. I'll meet you outside.
Barbara, what made your marriage break up?
I don't know. It's difficult to pinpoint a time, a particular incident, isn't it? It started to break up after the boy died.
You think that was the cause?
I don't know. Herbert was always jealous. There's 25 years difference in our ages. It didn't bother me, but it did him. He was always setting little traps for me, saying this man or that man was in love with me.
Well, I expect he had a point there.
Thank you.
You've had quite a few men in love with you, haven't you?
That's a trap question, too. If I say yes, I sound conceited. If I say no, I sound phony.
Did you know Hugh Chalk was in love with you?
Hugh Chalk?
I found him weeping beside the record player last night after you'd gone.
Poor Hugh.
You did know then?
Yes, I knew. Hugh Chalk's a very surprising man. On the surface, he's cold and methodical, the complete scientist. But he isn't like that at all, really. Underneath, he's passionate and unstable and terribly jealous.
Jealous enough to kill a rival?
I don't know. I've wondered about that, too.
He could have done it, you know. He has enough scientific knowledge. Not only that, he was in the plant at the time Carswood was killed. He said he wasn't able to sleep. Okay, you go on up. I'll wait for you.
Aren't you coming up? Oh, come on. We can have a drink together.
Okay, I'll join you in a minute. She went quickly into the building. I watched her go. Heather was right. She was a very lovely creature, dark and slender and smoothly graceful. It wasn't the hardest thing in the world to believe that many men would be prepared to murder for her. I paid off the cab and went up to number 38. The door was ajar. Hearing my step in the corridor, Barbara sang out.
Come in, Philip.
I went in. The door closed quickly behind me. I turned around. I was looking at a gun. A small black automatic. Herbert J. Truscott was holding it. Tell me something, Mr. Trescott. What good is it going to do you to kill me?
None at all. But I'm not trying to do good to anyone. Not anymore. I tried to do good for a lot of people once. That's over.
But why me particularly?
Because you interfered once too often.
A lot of things happened during the next 20 seconds. A snarl of traffic went past Windermere Towers, coming from and going to the center of Manchester. Somebody switched on a radio in the flat below. And outside in the corridor, somebody started using a vacuum cleaner. A lot of people in the world died, a lot more were born. A lot fell in love and fell out of love, made fortunes and went broke. People got ideas for books, stories, plays, and songs. Just 20 seconds. And I spent them all staring at a small automatic pistol and wondering whether Herbert Truscott was mad enough, desperate enough, incensed enough to fire it. His yellowish face wasn't reassuring. It was drawn and haggard, the face of a man who was pretty near breaking point, a man who was quite prepared to start blasting away with a gun if somebody said the wrong word. I decided to say nothing. A few more seconds went by, and then he spoke to his wife, who'd been standing there as stiff and scared and silent as I was.
Barbara, go into the bedroom.
Herbert,
Do as I say. Sit down, Odell. Over there by the window. Good. Now, you've been finding out a lot of things, haven't you?
Well, that's what you hired me to do, Mr. Truscott.
I hired you to find out who was behind the production holdups, nothing else.
Okay, those holdups led to the death of David Carswood.
You insisted on bringing in the police. If I'd wanted the police in it, I'd have gone to them in the first place. I wouldn't have come to you. Well?
I'm not saying anything, Mr. Trescott. Not while you're pointing a gun at me.
Perhaps you think I wouldn't use it.
I don't think anything of the sort.
Hey, you're no fool. Pass me a cigarette, will you? There's one in that silver box there. Now, give me a light. Thanks. Now, listen. I'm a very ordinary man, Odell. Very ordinary. The last thing you'd expect is that I'd be standing here pointing a gun at you, isn't it?
You can stop doing it any time you like.
I'm not like you, Odell. I'm not adaptable. I'm very limited and set in my ways. Pitchfork me out of my element and I'm done for. I lose my bearings.
And grab for a gun.
That's it.
Tell me something, Mr. Truscott. What good is it going to do you to kill me?
None at all. But I'm not trying to do good to anyone, not anymore. I tried to do good for a lot of people once. That's over.
But why me particularly?
Because you interfered once too often.
Because I persuaded Barbara, Mrs. Truscott, not to get that plane.
How did you persuade her? Tell me that.
Oh, I see.
David Carswood was young and good-looking. He persuaded her to leave home. You're not so young or so good-looking. Who knows what appeals to a woman like that?
You're off the beam, Mr. Trescott. Hopelessly off the beam.
Am I?
Why don't you go and get her in here and ask her?
So she can tell me some more lies?
She told me plenty about Carswood.
And now Carswood's dead.
Yes.
Killed in your plant, working in your labs.
Exactly.
Now I'm in your employ. I, too, wind up dead. What do the police think?
They think I killed you.
Unless they're as dumb as you once suggested.
Look, by now they think I killed David Carswood.
How do you know that?
Superintendent Manley is in Manchester. He called at my house this morning.
You think this means he believes you killed Carswood?
Well, what else? My wife and Carswood were... Well, they saw a great deal of one another. I was jealous. Now, that can be checked easily enough. Then Carswood dies in mysterious circumstances. I imagine Superintendent Manley is as good at putting two and two together and making five of it as the next man.
But you didn't kill Carswood, did you?
Well, what do you think?
I don't know. Yes, I suppose my lack of success is funny.
I was laughing at your courage.
Oh, courage is something you laugh at, huh?
Well, most men would have said they didn't think I'd killed Carswood.
Yeah, I guess so. Mr. Truscott, I know how you feel.
Do you?
You don't feel there's any more point to anything, do you?
Quite right. Only last night she came to me and asked me to forgive her. She told me she was in a terrible mess. I offered to take her away out of the country. And then you turn up at the airport and she changes her mind again. That's the end. The police are after me. She made a fool of me again, and you... I might as well make a quick, clean end to it all.
All right. Why don't you do it?
What would you do in my position?
I don't know.
Would you want to go on living?
Maybe not.
From the very first moment I saw her, literally the very first moment, I loved her. No, I adored her. I thought she was the most wonderful, the most exquisite creature that God ever put breath into. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Have you ever felt like that about a woman, Odell?
No.
You think I'm a sentimental fool?
No, I think you're very lucky.
Lucky when she lied and connived?
No, lucky that you ever experienced it. How many men do you suppose experience something so tremendous as that?
No, but it's finished. It's over.
No, it isn't. You still feel the same about her.
No, I don't. She let me down. She drove...
Herbert, there's somebody at the door.
I know.
Aren't you going to let them in?
No, I told you I'm going to make a nice clean...
Pick it up, Barbara.
What shall I do with it?
Give it to me.
Give me that gun.
No, you don't. Barbara, open the door.
Give me that gun.
No.
May I come in? Thank you.
Who are you?
Superintendent Manley. Oh, hello, Odell. I thought we had an agreement that you'd report all developments to me.
I'm sorry, Superintendent. Things have been happening rather quickly.
So I see. Is that a gun you have in your pocket?
Yes.
Is it yours?
Yes, it is.
You have a license for it, of course.
Of course.
Look, Superintendent, there's no need for any more shilly-shallying.
This lady is your wife, Mr. Truscott?
Yes, but
I'm sorry, but I have a warrant for her arrest.
A warrant for her arrest? On what charge?
At present, manslaughter. Later, we might find it necessary to change it. Mrs. Truscott, I must give you the usual warning. Anything you say may be taken down and used in evidence.
You're taking her back to Barton Medworth?
Yes. The inquest on Kenneth Armstrong opens tomorrow.
I see. Will you oppose bail?
Yes. As I say, there's a distinct likelihood that we may have to change the charge.
To one of murder?
Yes.
But that's insane. My wife didn't murder Ken Armstrong.
Her car's been identified as the one that ran him down. His blood was on the bonnet.
You found my car then?
Yes.
Did somebody tell you where it was?
Mrs. Truscott, I don't
Please tell me.
Yes. We were given certain information.
I see. May I put a few things into a bag?
Certainly.
No, don't go, Barbara.
It's all right, Herbert. They've still got to prove it.
Listen, Superintendent, she isn't the one you want. I killed David Carswood. I had a motive. Carswood was very friendly with my wife. I was jealous. Arrest me. I'm the one you want.
Mr. Truscott, you're only wasting my time.
You don't know I didn't kill Carswood, do you?
No, but then we don't know that Carswood was killed. We do know that Armstrong was. A woman driving a red German sports car.
I could have done that, too. I could have disguised myself as a woman.
I'm ready now, Superintendent.
No, you're not to go. I've made a confession.
I'm very sorry I've brought all this trouble on you, Herbert. Truly I am. You never did anything to deserve it. It's just that you should never have married someone like me.
Barbara, no, you mustn't go. You mustn't go.
Mrs. Truscott.
Yes, I'm coming.
I shall want to have a talk with you, Odell, when you return to Barton Medworth. I take it you'll do that at once.
I will.
Good. Come along, Mrs. Truscott.
Mr. Truscott, can I get you something?
A drink? No, I'm all right.
What are you going to do?
stay here?
Doing what?
Why did you lie to the superintendent about the gun? I meant to kill you, you know.
I know.
I hated you. I was mad. I was prepared to do anything.
But you're not like that now.
No. Just drained out.
Okay, you had your moment of madness. Now it's over. So let's get back to work, shall we? We'll go and pick up my car and then drive down to Barton Medworth. Who knows? Maybe Heather will have found out something. She's a pretty smart girl.
Yes, Odell, I found out quite a few things. By the way, where's Mr. Truscott?
In his room. When we got in from Manchester, I persuaded him he needed a rest and slipped him a couple of pheno barbs. He won't bother us for a few hours.
Oh, poor Herbert. He must be madly in love with that woman.
He is.
I wonder how it feels to have a man prepared to do murder for your sake.
You had found out quite a few things while I've been away.
Oh, yes. Well, let me take them in order.
Splendid idea.
I jotted them down on a piece of paper. Did you fall in love with her, too?
Barbara Oyrich? Oh, she's a very beautiful woman, certainly, but Now, look, Heather, will you kindly keep your mind on the business in hand?
Well, it seems to me that Miss Oyrich's love life has an awful lot to do with the business in hand. She had a whirl with David Carswood, and he wound up dead. Her husband's crazy mad in the head about her, and
Look, I'm not part of Miss Oyrich's love life.
Not the tiniest little bit?
Not the remotest particle. Now, may I have the report?
Certainly, sir. Situation report coming right up. I would like to say that since your departure for Manchester, a state of considerable tension has been building up here in Barton Medworth, starting with Hugh Chalk. He's been in such a pent-up state that he spent most of his waking hours inside a whiskey bottle.
That figures. He's in love with Barbara Oyrich, too.
You see, I was right when I said...
The situation report.
Next item. Martin Derson and Win Craxton have been quarreling rather violently.
Oh, what about?
I'm not sure.
Don't tell me it's Barbara Oyrich again.
I don't think so. I fancy it's the experiment they've been conducting. You know, based on your theory of how Carswood was killed.
Yes. Derson said there might be something in it, and Craxton thought not. I didn't realize it amounted to anything more than a technical disagreement.
Well, I went across to the plant shortly after you left and heard them yelling at each other in the lab. Most untechnical language, too. Craxton called Derson a pig-headed lunatic. Derson offered to knock Craxton's block off. Then Craxton slammed out, and since then Derson's been working on his own.
Anything else?
Colonel Gessling's come back. Fred Fazackerly phoned me. He said he thought that you should have another talk with the old boy. He suggested you should get in touch with him and fix up something. Fred's protecting his 10%.
Where's he staying?
The Royal Oak.
Give me the Royal Oak, please. Yes, Barton Medworth. That the end of the situation report, Angel?
No, one more item. The piece de resistance, if I may say so.
Hold it a minute. I want to speak to Mr. Fazackerly, please. Philip Odell. Okay, I'll hold on. The, piece de resistance?
Colonel Gessling's niece Jill has been here.
To Trescott House?
Yes, out in the garden. I only saw her at a distance, walking in the shrubbery with a man, holding hands, too. And once they stopped and kissed. Ooh, big stuff, too, that kiss.
Well, who was the man?
I couldn't see. He had his back to me.
Hello? Yes? Yes, I see. All right, thank you. Well, that's odd. Fred Fazackerly checked out 2 hours ago.
But he said he'd wait for your call.
Well, he's gone. He left in a cab and apparently caught a train to Manchester. So Jill Gessling has a lover in Truscott House, eh?
Apparently. Shouldn't be too difficult to find out who it is. As a matter of fact, I have a theory. You want to hear it?
Well, since it has to do with old friend Lamour, it should be right up your alley.
Don't think I missed the note of sarcasm in that. Well, my theory is that Jill Gessling's lover is the man who killed Carswood.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to expand on that?
Well, it all fits. That lab over the Colonel's garage, it wasn't the Colonel's. It was where the murderer worked out his murder method, where he tested the conversion of the flu vaccine into a gas. Well, he couldn't have done that in Truscott's lab, now could he? Well, not without exciting suspicion. So he got Jill to let him use the garage. Shall I go on?
Yes, I'm fascinated.
Well, the Colonel finds out about this, realizes that Jill's boyfriend is the murderer of Carswood, and gets in touch with you to tell you.
But the boyfriend, or Jill, finds out and fills him so full of dope that by the time we arrive, he can only talk a lot of nonsense. You think that's all crazy, don't you?
No. No, I don't.
You don't?
I think it's very ingenious. I don't know how we're going to prove it, but it's worth working on.
Well, I've narrowed it down to 3 suspects. Hugh Chalk, Martin Dayson, and Win Craxton. All 3 have sufficient technical knowledge, and all 3 were in the plant on the night of Carswood's death.
Yes, and all 3 had a key to the garage where Barbara Truscott kept the little German sports car. Any one of them could have borrowed it and run down Ken Armstrong.
Except that the tobacconist swears that the driver was a woman.
Anyhow, what about motives? Hugh Chalk's is the strongest, isn't it? He was in love with Barbara, and she preferred David Carswood. By the way, where is Master Hugh?
He went out. I've been trying to keep an eye on all 3 of them at once. But when I saw Jill Gessling in the garden, I got involved in that. It was then that Hugh Chalk went out.
Would he be at the plant?
No, I've been over and checked.
Well, he may be out at the Gesslings. Let's go and take a look.
But didn't the police superintendent want to talk to you?
Oh, yes. I better give him a ring.
You said that he looked as though he was going to give you the stick.
Yes. Police station, please. I'm going to get it in the neck for not having reported finding that German sports car you watch. Superintendent Manley, please. Philip Odell. Right.
How did the police find it?
Somebody tipped them off.
Oh. Somebody who wanted them to believe that she killed Armstrong?
Yes. Hello. I see. Yes. Yes, I'll be there. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Right. Well, that's that. Let's drive over to the Gesslings.
There he is.
Where?
Among the rose bushes.
Quite the gardener. Let's hope he isn't full of dope this time.
Good evening.
Good evening, Colonel.
Just cutting off the dead blooms. The wet weather's been very bad for them.
Fred Fazakerly has suggested you might like to see me again.
Oh, for Zachary, yes. Yes, he went back to Manchester, you know.
I found that out.
Very unreliable chap. Not a credit to your profession, Mr. Odell. I finished with him. Finished completely.
There's no truth in what he said, then?
About my wanting to talk to you?
Yes.
None at all. His own idea, entirely. I expect he was trying to get money out of you. Did he mention it?
As a matter of fact, he did.
There you are, then. I hear you're getting your troubles sorted out down at Trescots.
First I've heard of it.
Mrs. Truscott's been arrested.
How did you know?
My job to know these things. I'm a member of the Barton Medworth bench, you know.
The police could have the wrong person, Colonel.
Most unlikely. From all I hear, they've an open and shut case against her.
Colonel, we took the liberty of coming over here while you were away.
Oh, yes?
We found the lab.
The what?
The lab. Over your garage.
I don't know what you're talking about. Only an old storage room over the garage. Look for yourself.
Thank you. I will. Excuse me.
Do you like roses, Miss McMara?
Very much.
I'll give you a nice bunch to take back with you.
Oh, thank you very much.
I went into the garage and up the rickety flight of stairs. There was no sign of the lab in the upper room. Everything had been removed. Bench, retorts, microscope, everything. And in its place, some old trunks, packing cases, a dusty confusion of useless bric-a-brac. Well, I was on the point of leaving when I caught sight of something dark and woolly thrust into the space formed by one of the roof supports in the pitch of the roof. I got up on a packing case and took it down. Then I put it in my pocket and went back to the rose garden. Heather and the colonel had been joined by Jill. She was looking as pale and severe as ever.
My uncle tells me you thought he had a laboratory up there.
Yes, Miss Gessling. But I see he hasn't now. Somebody did a quick scene change.
That room has always been used as a storeroom, Mr. Odell, ever since we moved into this house.
Oh. Oh, we must have seen that lab in another house.
You must have. Now, you must excuse us. It's time for my uncle to go indoors.
Goodbye, Odell. Nice to have seen you again. I hope you like the roses, Miss McMara.
Well, at least he wasn't full of dope this time.
No, but he was scared stiff.
He has every reason to be. If your theory is right, he runs a considerable risk of being victim number 3. Did you get anything out of him while I was in the garage?
No. His wardress appeared almost immediately after you left us.
Well, the trip wasn't entirely unproductive, Heather. Far from it. Here, look at this.
What is it? A wig.
The same color as Barbara Truscott's hair.
The murderer wore this when he ran down Ken Armstrong?
Well, it looks like it, doesn't it? Is the maker's name inside it?
Yes. Yes, there's a little tab. Havergill, theatrical costumier, Bristol.
Good. At long last, we've got something concrete to work on. Heather, when we get back to Barton Medworth, I want you to take the car and drive to Bristol. The shop won't be open when you get there, but try and get hold of Mr. Havergill or whoever runs the place. If you can't get him in tonight, stay over and get hold of him the first thing in the morning. But find out who bought that wig. I handed over to Heather outside the plant, and she drove off. And then I went in. Win Craxton was alone in the lab. His eyes were a little bloodshot, and he gave me a quick, resentful look.
Where have you been?
Manchester. Why? Did you want me?
You're supposed to be in charge of the investigation, aren't you?
Yes, but the investigation happened to shift suddenly to Manchester. I had to shift with it.
Has Barbara been arrested?
Yes. Somebody tipped off the police that there was blood on her car. Was it you, Dr. Craxton?
Yes, it was. I wanted to tell you first, but you weren't here.
So you went to the police?
It was my duty, wasn't it? The police were looking for the car which ran down Ken Armstrong.
How did you know it was that car? A red German sports car.
Oh, I checked first. I rang up the police station and asked them for the description of the car they were looking for.
What made you suspect? Just the bloodstains in the bonnet?
Yes, that, plus the fact that Barbara Truscott suddenly left Barton Medworth.
I see.
Wouldn't you have done the same in my place? Or are you, too, under the spell of the glamorous Barbara?
Obviously you're not.
Oh, why should she expect to get away with murder? Just because she's the wife of the great Herbert Truscott?
You think it was murder?
Well, that's what the police think, isn't it?
I imagine so. But they're going to come up against one very great difficulty if they're trying to pin it on her. Whoever killed Armstrong also killed Carswood.
You can't be sure of that. You can't even be sure that David was murdered.
Well, why then was Armstrong killed? He had some vital information about what happened in the void on the night of Carswood's death. He was knocked down before he could part with it. All that adds up. Otherwise, Armstrong's death was either an accident or an entity in itself, unconnected with Carswood.
Well, why not? That woman is capable of anything.
She'd have to have a motive. She isn't a homicidal maniac.
Well, her private life is so lurid, I expect you could find a motive without too much difficulty.
Oh, I expect I could. How's the experiment coming along?
Well, I've given it up. Dasson and I disagreed.
Yes, I heard about that.
I maintain that David died because there was a fault in the vaccine. And after all, I'm in a better position to judge that than Martin Dasson. I developed the process by which the vaccine is made, with David Carswood, of course. My theory is that the fault lay in the stabilizer. That's what I've always thought. The stabilizer failed, the virus came alive, and David was infected with it. Those are the facts, I'm sure. All this talk about murder is just so much fantasy.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, Dr. Craxton. By the way, where is Martin Derson?
I've no idea. He was working here an hour or two ago. I expect he's over at the house.
Would you care to walk over there with me?
Oh, all right.
We might have a drink together.
Well, that'd be nice.
Is this your hat?
Yes.
Yeah. Very small size you take.
Why, I have to have them specially made. Perhaps my brain isn't as large as I think it is.
Perhaps not. We went over to the house and had a drink. There was no sign of either Hugh Chalk or Martin Derson. Craxton went off to bed. Gradually, the recreation rooms began to clear and quiet descended on the house. Still, neither Chalk nor Derson showed up. Finally, a little past midnight, I went across to the plant again. The building was deserted and my footsteps echoed along the main corridor. Some instinct prompted me to go and take a look around the void again. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and went in. There was a light over on the far side above test room 8 where David Carswood had died. Hugh Chalk was sitting on the floor beside the air conditioning unit, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached. His usually neat hair was wild, his tie had gone, and he was in his shirt sleeves. A slack-mouthed,
grin spread across his face, and the fumes of whiskey rose up from him in an almost tangible cloud. He stared at me for a moment, having difficulty in focusing his eyes. Then he said,
"The master detective, hot on the trail." Why don't you say something? Some impressive pronouncement. And don't say you're drunk. I am drunk, O'Mara. I feel fine.
"Good.
Now, you say something."
All right. I was completely wrong about you, Dr. Chuck.
Oh, call me Hugh. Everything informal in the void. Why don't you sit on the floor?
Okay.
You were going to tell me something, weren't you, old man? I'm very interested. Very, very interested. I find you strangely interesting, Philip, old man.
When I first met you, Hugh, I had you figured as the complete man of science, efficient, organized, remote, and cold. But you're not in the least like that, are you?
Not in the least.
What are you doing up here, Hugh?
Am I under suspicion?
Oh, no. It's the most natural and expected thing in the world for you to be sitting here like this.
Do you happen to have a cigarette on you, old man?
Yeah.
Ought not to smoke in the void, you know, but what the heck. The great Trescott vaccine plant at a standstill. Nothing being produced but dust and a lot of silence. Thanks. And why?
Because 2 men were murdered.
Yes, because 2 men... Tell me something.
Well?
Do the police really believe that Barbara killed Ken Armstrong?
They arrested her, didn't they?
What do you think? Will they be able to prove it?
It's possible.
Why don't you open up? Why don't you say what you think? Why do you have to sit there looking like a Buddha? Watching, listening, slipping in sly little questions. Why don't you come right out and say what's in your mind?
Why don't you?
All right, I will. Give me a hand up.
Yeah.
Thanks. When I heard they'd arrested her, I decided to try my hand at some detective work.
So you started off by getting drunk.
As you say, I'm not a logical person. I thought I'd try and test your theory about the way David Carswood was killed. The murderer fed live germs into the air conditioning and blew them down this shaft into test room 8. First, I thought it was too far-fetched. Then I thought there might be something in this. Something happened up here in the void the night Carswood died. Armstrong knew what it was.
But was killed before he could pass it on.
So I started my little bit of detective work here, inside the air conditioning shaft.
Did you find anything?
Have a look for yourself. Go on. Look at the booster fan. You see it?
Yes. So, that's how it was done.
An ampoule of live virus taped to a blade of the booster fan. Fan was switched on, vibration fractured the ampoule, and the virus was released into the air current.
Yes. You.
Yes?
The ampoule that's in there now, it wasn't there when I looked inside that shaft before.
You're sure of that?
Positive.
Oh, we'd better take it off, hadn't we?
No, we're going to the police. Leave everything as it is.
Look, if the fan is switched on by
the police will be here in a few minutes. I'll phone them from your office.
It's locked and the key's over at the house. You'll have to phone from there.
We left the plant together to walk across the Truscott house. It was pitch dark. We were crossing the car park when suddenly Chalk broke away from me and ran off as fast as he could go. I yelled after him and started to follow. Then someone shouted my name.
Odell, come here, Odell.
I stopped and turned around. Herbert Truscott was standing in the lighted doorway of the plant. I went over to him.
Who's that you were with?
Hugh Chalk. We were on our way over to the house to ring up the police. He suddenly took off.
I'll come in. I've got something to show you.
No, look, I've got to get to...
That can wait. This can't. Come in. 20 minutes ago, I was woken up by a call on the internal phone. It was Martin Derson. He said he was in test room 8 and wanted to speak to me. He asked me to bring you and Win Craxton. I went along to your room, but of course you weren't there. Craxton wasn't in his room either.
Well, I had a drink with him about an hour ago. He then went up to bed.
Well, he was over here when I arrived. He met me outside test room 8. He said Derson had called him on the internal phone.
Then why did Derson ask you to bring him over with you?
I don't know.
Where's Craxton now?
In test room 8. Here we are.
I'm afraid it's too late, Mr. Truscott.
What's happened?
Martin Derson is dead.
Mr. Odell, are you all right?
Yeah. Give me a hand, will you?
You must have given your head a nasty crack.
Ooh, no, it's all right.
The superintendent went back to the station, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Ring him up and tell him I'm on my way over. Tell him I've got something very important to say to him. This time there was no argument about the police being called in. Not even from Herbert Truscott. Now we had 3 deaths in our hands, and maybe he was beginning to wonder whether he might not be the 4th. I was beginning to wonder that myself. Superintendent Manley was staying the night in Barton Medworth, and within the hour he was with us and began the questioning.
Dr. Craxton, you found the body, I understand?
Well, he wasn't actually dead when I found him. He was lying on the floor beside that bench.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to say something to me, but the words wouldn't come. He appeared to be in the grip of that lassitude which usually accompanies infection by a paralyzing virus.
As in the case of David Carswood?
Yes, except that Derson died in 10 minutes. David lasted a couple of hours. That proves, in my opinion, that Derson had been infected for some time. He'd been working with a vaccine sample for at least 24 hours.
You rule out the question of foul play, then?
Oh, entirely.
How did you happen to be in the plant tonight, Dr. Craxton?
Derson phoned me shortly after midnight and said he wanted to speak to me. I got dressed and came over.
I see. What did you do when you found him in a state of collapse?
I went along to the lab for a cylinder of oxygen to try and revive him. On the way, I met Mr. Truscott. I told him what had happened and asked him to get in touch with the hospital.
Right. Well, Dr. Craxton, Mr. Truscott, I won't keep you any longer now. But I may want to talk to you later on, so please keep in touch.
Very well, Superintendent. Come along, Craxton.
Did Derson phone you too, Odell?
No, I was already in the plant, up in the void.
What are you doing there?
Talking to Hugh Chalk. He'd found an ampoule of vaccine taped to a blade of the booster fan which supplies the air conditioning to this test room. This seemed to bear out my theory that live germs had been fed into the air conditioning and blown down on Carswood while he was working in here. I told Chalk that we should report this immediately to the police. We were on our way over to Trescott House when he ran away. I started to go after him, but Mr. Truscott called me back.
Where's Chalk now? Did he return?
No, he's still missing.
Odell, you're quite convinced this is murder we're dealing with, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Well, let's say it is murder for the moment. Why was Derson killed?
I think that's easy enough. He had discovered the identity of the murderer during the course of his experiment.
The murderer knew this and struck before he could pass on his knowledge.
As in the case of Ken Armstrong. Armstrong actually saw the murderer in the void on the night of Carswood's death.
Well, that narrows it down a bit, doesn't it? How many people could know that Derson's experiment had revealed the identity of the murderer?
Well, there's Hugh Chalk.
Who's disappeared.
Craxton.
Who was with Derson when he died.
Truscott.
Who was in the plant. Anybody else?
Nobody I can think of.
Yeah. Now, the method. All the murderer had to do was to nip smartly up to the void, turn on the booster fan, and spray this room with death-dealing germs.
That's it.
Well, I'm not a bacteriologist, but do germs strike that fast? Can they kill within a matter of minutes?
But was it a matter of minutes? In either case, Derson could have been infected any time during the past 36 hours. Carswood was in and out of here for one whole day while we were working on those tests. Besides, these germs were reared in a culture that could increase their virulence.
All right, let's pursue your theory a step further. Derson uncovered the identity of the murderer while working on his experiment. Now, wouldn't he keep notes of that experiment?
I would think so.
Any idea where they might be?
He had a locker in the main lab. I have a set of master keys. Let's go over and take a look.
Notebook. Understand any of this?
No, but we could get them deciphered.
No, what's this?
It's a tape recording. The final experiment. And yesterday's date. This might be what we're looking for.
Well, can we play it? Is there a machine in here?
No, but there's one in the recreation room at Trescott House. If you'd care to come over there, we can try it out.
On the completion of the inactivation period, the residual formaldehyde in the site's filtered suspensions were neutralized by sodium metabisulfite. The result of the experiments may therefore be summarized as follows.
This is it.
1. A batch of 25 doses of vaccine was drawn off for the tests. Each dose was separately sealed in an ordinary glass ampoule. An extensive check revealed that 3 of these ampoules are missing.
And 2 have been used on Carswood and Derson himself.
2. During the course of the separation test, I discovered quite by accident that the virus could be reactivated by the introduction of an extra quantity of the Carswood stabilizer. 0.07% is sufficient. This not only makes the virus active, but for some reason increases its virulence. A person infected by this reactivated virus would, in my opinion, die within a very short space of time.
Little did he know that was going to happen to him.
You're right.
3. To answer the question, how were the germs thus reactivated, released into the atmosphere, I subjected an ampoule of these reactivated germs to a series of agitation tests. I found that after some 30 seconds on a spin rig, the vaccine vaporized. Then it expanded and burst the glass of the ampoule, releasing the germs into the atmosphere, or, in the case of Carswood, into the air conditioning shaft feeding test room 8.
So?
Finally, only a person who had worked extensively on the production of the Carswood stabilizer could know of this. Also, it seems likely that he actually drew off the 25 test ampoules, reactivating them while doing so. With one of these ampoules, he caused the death of David Carswood.
Well, that's all. Well, there's the answer.
The man who drew off the test samples is the murderer. Well, it shouldn't be too difficult to put a name to him, should it? There must be a record.
Hugh Chalk would have one.
But Hugh Chalk's disappeared. Well, I'll send out a call for him to be brought in.
Well, Chalk may have done it himself.
Superintendent Manley, give me the police station, please.
And he had a motive for wanting Carswood out of the way.
What was it?
He's in love with Barbara Truscott, and he thought she was in love with Carswood.
Yeah. Now, Bellamy, Superintendent Manley, I want a general call sent out for Dr. Hugh Chalk, formerly director of the Truscott vaccine plant. Well, just a minute. I'll get Odell to give you that. Give the sergeant a description, will you?
Okay. Hello. Odell here. Chalk's in the early 30s. He's slight build, 5'9" or 10. Light brown hair. Wears rimless spectacles. Yes, pale complexion. He was wearing a brown tweed jacket. Pale blue shirt, no tie. Gray slacks and brown shoes. He was last seen outside here about 12:15. Yes, he has a small saloon car. It's light blue. Registration number NWV830. Okay. No, not at all. Goodbye.
Well, while we're waiting, do you think there's any way... What's that?
Somebody outside the French windows.
Well, look out for yourself. There's still one of those damned ampoules unaccounted for.
Oh, it's you.
When I saw the light on, I guessed you were in here. Nobody else keeps such ungodly hours.
Superintendent, this is Heather McMara.
Yes, we have met.
Oh, gosh, I'm tired. Just driven to Bristol and back, and been to a reunion dinner.
A reunion dinner?
Yes, Mr. Havergill was attending one. Some historical society.
Look, sit down, Heather. Superintendent, I'd better put you in the picture on this. I found a wig, which I think the murderer used when he ran down Ken Armstrong and Barbara Truscott's car.
Huh?
He wanted us to think that she was driving at the time. Now, the name of the maker was inside the wig, Havergill's of Bristol. So I sent Heather to see if she could find out to whom it was sold.
It was sold to Hugh Chalk.
Hugh Chalk? Are you sure?
Yes. Havergill remembered it distinctly because it had to be such a small size.
Well, it looks as if we have the answer. Find Hugh Chalk and our troubles are over. I'd better get down to the station. You two look as if you could do with some sleep.
Oh, I'm almost asleep on my nose now.
By the way, Odell, before you do go to bed, you'd better see that the plant's locked up.
Yes, I'll do that, Superintendent.
I'll put a man on it. Also, we better make sure that nobody leaves this house.
Okay. I'll keep guard till your man arrives.
Thanks. I'll keep you informed.
Anything happened while I've been away?
Yes. Martin Derson is dead.
No.
The same way as David Carswood. He had proved that Carswood was killed in the way I thought. He also found out that 3 ampoules of live germs are missing, and only 2 have been used.
That's a chilly thought, isn't it?
Very.
So Hugh Chalk is somewhere out there in the night with a little glass tube.
Presumably. Now, look, lock your door and window. I'm going over to lock up the plant now.
Well, for heaven's sake, be careful. Goodness knows you're not the best employer a girl ever had, but you're the only one I've got.
I went across to the plant again. I forced myself to make a tour of the empty rooms before I locked up. I had my heart in my mouth most of the time. And then I went back to Trescott House and sat in the hall until I was relieved by Manley's man. I went up to my room, but I didn't feel sleepy and didn't undress, but lay on the bed smoking and thinking. It looked as though we were nearing the end of the line and that all we had to do was catch up with Hugh Chalk. But there was something that
that got in the way, something that seemed to be drifting around on the edges of my consciousness, something that kept evading my memory. Then suddenly it hit me. Hugh Chalk's head. I jumped off the bed and went along to his room, which was 4 doors from mine. The door was unlocked, and so was the wardrobe. 2 hats were hanging in the wardrobe, a bowler and something which looked vaguely like a deerstalker. I took the deerstalker, looked at the inner band, and then stuffed it into my pocket. In my hurry and excitement, I fell down the last 6 stairs of the main staircase.
Mr. Odell, are you all right?
Yeah. Give me a hand up, will you?
You must have given your head a nasty crack.
It's all right. The superintendent went back to the station, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, ring him up and tell him I'm on my way over. Tell him I've got something very important to say to him.
Right, I'll do that, Mr. Odell.
I got the car out and drove most of the way to the police station on 2 wheels. Well, it was nearly 8 o'clock before the superintendent and I broke it up. When I got back to Trescott House, I took a bath and promptly fell asleep in it. I woke up when the water was cold and got out feeling irritable and resentful. When I finally went downstairs again, breakfast was over and the entire staff was collected in the recreation room. They all seemed to be talking at once.
Morning, Odell. You look awful.
Thanks. I fell asleep in my bath.
You heard the news? Superintendent Manley's going to make an announcement at 10 o'clock to the entire staff.
What's all this about, Odell? Does it mean they've caught Hugh Chalk?
I imagine so.
I never did like him. A brilliant scientist, but very, very unstable.
If he killed 3 men, that's putting it mildly, Mr. Truscott.
Well, they've no reason to keep Barbara in custody any longer, have they?
Not so far as I know.
Well, look, it's only just after 9. I think I'll go down to the police station and find out.
Well, I'll come with you. Heather, you'd better come, too. I gave myself a crack on the head last night, and I don't feel much like driving a car. At the police station, Truscott and I were shown into a small office off the charge room. Heather stayed outside with the car. Presently, Barbara Truscott was brought in. She looked pale, but still very beautiful.
Well, you can come home now, Barbara. I mean, there's no reason for them to keep you here any longer.
They said it'd be safer if I stayed until they caught you.
Well, haven't they caught him yet?
No, but apparently they expect to arrest him very shortly.
Oh, of course. Well, the superintendent's right. You're not safe while he's still at large. Well, the fellow's mad, naturally. Stark, staring, raving mad.
They'll hang him, I imagine.
Well, of course, and he richly deserves it.
Mr. Truscott?
Yes?
Superintendent would like to see you in his office.
Oh, very well. Now, don't worry, Barbara. I'll see to it that you get every care and attention.
I expect you know how I'm feeling.
I think so, but there's no reason for you to.
He killed 3 people all because of me.
Well, that's what it seems like.
That's what it is.
But you're not responsible for the way he reacted, Barbara. You weren't to know that he'd resort to murder.
I wonder. I always knew Hugh was unbalanced. I know he doesn't appear like that. Always so calm and collected. But it doesn't take you long to find out that that's only a front, maintained with the utmost difficulty. Not if you're a woman, that is. Oh, what a terrible, terrible mess it all is.
Look, Barbara, you mustn't torture yourself. When it's all finished, you may find that, well, that it wasn't the way you thought it was.
Do you think I'm ever going to forgive myself? That I'm ever going to stop feeling responsible?
Yes, I think you'll stop feeling like that much sooner than you realize.
You think I'm so irresponsible? Yes, I suppose you must do. And why not? Right from the start, I've behaved without a thought for anything but my own pleasure. But, Philip, I never realized, I never dreamed that it would lead to 3 murders.
Oh, of course you didn't. How could you?
All right, I was selfish and silly and thoughtless. Perhaps it went right back to my marrying Herbert. People told me it wouldn't work out. He was so much older, his tastes were so different. But I did love him, Philip. I did my best to make him a good wife. But his terrible fits of jealousy, his suspicion, his accusations...
I understand.
Then when our boy died, well, it just didn't seem worth it anymore. I wasn't ever in love with David Carswood, but he was nice and kind and gentle, and he didn't make scenes.
And there didn't seem to be any harm in it.
No. And when I realized he was getting serious, I stopped it.
What about Hugh? Did he fall in love with you right off the bat without any encouragement?
How can I answer that truthfully? I don't know. I went out with him a few times. He was interesting, gay, amusing. I didn't mean to encourage him. How do you know what people read into the things you say and do?
You don't. Especially if you're a woman and as beautiful as you are.
A lot of happiness, my being beautiful has brought, hasn't it? A broken home and 3 murders.
What'll you do when it's all over?
I don't know.
Mr. Odell, the superintendent would like you to go in now, if you please.
Okay. Goodbye, Barbara.
Goodbye, Philip.
I wish you well.
Take care of yourself. I'll think of you.
It was nearly 10 o'clock when Manley, Truscott, and I bundled into my car, and Heather drove us back to Truscott House. We went straight to the recreation room where the staff were still gathered.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? As you all know, there have been 3 very tragic accidents in our midst. We all feel very deeply about the loss of our colleagues, but there has been a certain amount of speculation. It has been suggested that they were not accidents. In view of this, I've asked Superintendent Manley to say a few words to you on this subject. Superintendent Manley.
Well, thank you, Mr. Truscott. All I want to say is that we, the police, have investigated the deaths of David Carswood, Ken Armstrong, and Martin Derson, and our investigations have not revealed any evidence of foul play. Well, this will not be made official, of course, until after the inquest. But I can tell you that so far as we're concerned, no charges against any person or persons are contemplated. Just one more thing. In view of this, the vaccine plant will be closed indefinitely. Later, perhaps, it may be possible to resume production after an inquiry. In the meantime, Mr. Trescots asked me to tell you that arrangements have been made to absorb you all in the company's plant in Manchester. Well, 2 coaches have been hired, and they'll leave Barton Medworth at 7 o'clock this evening. Thank you for your attention.
Well, this announcement caused no little surprise, as you may imagine. While they packed their bags, the staff debated it endlessly. Various conclusions were reached, even the highly colored one that Truscott himself had murdered the 3 men and had bought off the police. The day wore on, but for me it was interminable. I smoked endless cigarettes, wandered around aimlessly, and generally worked up a set of jangling nerves. When 6 o'clock came, I was out in the garden, and across the lawn came Heather with an expression of fixed determination on her face.
Look, Odell. You're hiding something.
Hiding something, am I?
Herbert Truscott's going to make another announcement. He wants everyone in the recreation room at 6:15.
Well, it's his recreation room and his staff. I suppose he can make all the announcements he wants.
Well, there's something going on, and you know what it is. You're deliberately keeping it hidden from me.
Oh? What makes you think that?
The fact that you didn't get up on your hind legs and start yelling when Superintendent Manley said that those 3 men died as a result of accidents. All along you've been convinced it was murder. You've even proved it.
I've proved nothing except that I'm not a very good detective.
You're not orthodox, but you're a good one. You achieve results and you don't let go. Not when you've once been convinced.
Well, I can be wrong, Heather. Everyone can be wrong.
Odell, this is me, Heather.
All right. Maybe I have been rather odd today, but you see, I fell down the stairs and gave my head a nasty crack. I keep feeling as though I'm shooting off into outer space.
Oh, you ought to see a doctor or lie down. After all, You're trying to head me off, aren't you? Appealing to my sympathy.
Heather, let's go and have a drink, shall we? And then at 6:15 we can go and hear Herbert Truscott on the soapbox.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. The transfer of staff to Manchester has been cancelled. The reason for this is that I personally am not satisfied with Superintendent Manley's verdict. I believe those 3 men were murdered. Mr. Odell has proof of this. His case is almost complete. By tomorrow morning, he is confident that he will be in a position to go to the police and demand that a warrant be taken out for the man who murdered Carswood, Armstrong, and Derson. I repeat, murdered. In view of this, I'm going to make a last-minute change of plan. I want everyone to stay put. This development will vindicate our influenza vaccine. We shall be able to prove beyond doubt that Carswood and Derson did not die because it was faulty. in which case there's no reason why we should not resume production almost immediately. It must be remembered that a great deal of money has been sunk into this project, and that we shall be producing a product which will have a highly beneficial effect on the health of this nation. Thank you.
There you are. Always his money, nothing else matters. People can die, his wife put in jail, but his first and last thought is always his money.
What do you work for, Dr. Crexton? The love of humanity?
Oh, I doubt whether you would understand. Excuse me.
Fiery little blighter, isn't he?
Now, are you going to tell me what all this means, Odell?
Heather, dear, dear Heather. I'm going to ask you to do something that's very difficult for someone of your vivacious and attractive temperament.
Well, you can skip the Irish charm. What do you want me to do?
Be patient,
Oh, I see. Stop asking questions, you mean?
if you like.
Where are you going now?
For a drive.
Alone?
Yes, I want to get some things sorted out in my mind.
Well, be careful. Remember that crack on your head.
I drove around till it got dark. That did nothing for my nerves or the ache in my head. I still felt as though I were floating several feet off the ground. I drove back to the plant, parked the car, and walked slowly up to the main doors. I let myself into the plant and went up to test room 8. I sat on the workbench, rested my back against the wall, and hoped that it would soon be over. I didn't think I could take a long wait. I don't know how long it was. It may have been an hour or 2 hours or only 30 minutes. Then the door opened. How did you get in?
You left the front door open.
That's careless of me.
Look, you've got to tell me what's going on.
I'm thinking.
All right. I'll stay here till you do tell me.
Oh, all right, I'll tell you. We set a trap.
Who's we?
Manley and I. I'm pretty sure I know who the murderer is, but I haven't got enough proof. So we're trying to get the murderer to come out into the open and show his hand.
How?
Well, it's not a very ingenious trap, but it was all we could think of on the spur of the moment. We arranged for Manley to make his announcement to lull the murderer into a sense of security. Well, having done that, we got Trescott to say that I had the evidence that it was murder. That I knew and could prove who the murderer was.
And then?
Well, Ken Armstrong knew who the murderer was, and so did Martin Derson.
I see. And they were both killed.
Exactly.
So you're sitting up here waiting for the murderer to kill you?
To try and kill me, Heather.
Okay. Then I'm staying with you.
Now, look, Heather.
If your trap is foolproof...
It isn't foolproof.
Then there is a risk that you may get
No,
killed.
it's better if you're not here. Please believe me. Now, look.
Isn't that the air conditioner fan?
It is.
And the murderer's up in the void. He's spraying those deadly germs into this room. Here, what are you doing?
Now, you're getting out of here. That's what you're doing.
You're coming too. I won't.
You're not. After a few minutes, she went away, obviously to get help. I went back to the bench and listened to the air rushing through the inlet duct. And suddenly the room began to spin. The floor rushed up to meet me as I toppled off the bench. After that, nothing. The next thing I heard was the key turning in the lock. Win Craxton came into the room, a gauze mask over his mouth and nose. He closed the door carefully behind him. Then he came over to where I was lying and looked down at me, amusement in his eyes.
So you had all the proof, had you? You knew how it was done. Very clever. But it's not going to do you much good, is it? You remember the third ampoule? Well, its contents just came down through that inlet duct, and you inhaled some very healthy and active germs. Remember what Derson said about them? They can kill a man in a matter of minutes. Can't move, can you? A deadly lassitude. Carswood had it, and Derson. Well, now, like them, you are going to die. Not that I ever had anything against you personally. It was different with Carswood. He did me a great injury. He stole my ideas. He got the Nobel Prize for work I did. He deserved to die, but...
Dr. Craxton, I have a warrant for your arrest. I must warn you that anything you say will be taken down in writing and may be used in evidence.
I see.
Then put the handcuffs on him.
Odell, can you move? I've sent for the ambulance.
It's all right, Angel. It was that crack in the head. It must have been worse than I thought.
Then you didn't inhale any of those germs?
No, of course I didn't. We switched the ampoule he had taped to the fan. It contained nothing more deadly than distilled water.
So? I got into a dreadful state for nothing. Honestly, Odell, I think you're quite the most unthinking man.
Well, that's just about wound it up. Barbara Truscott was released and went back to her husband. I never saw her again. Hugh Chalk was found sitting in his car at the side of a road in Somerset. He had run away because he thought a murder rap was going to be pinned on him. And it might have been if it hadn't been for the extremely small size of Win Craxton's head. Craxton, posing as Hugh Chalk to buy that wig, was his one big mistake. The Truscott plant reopened, and the influenza vaccine eventually reached the market. I got my £5,000, and that was that, except for one small footnote. 2 weeks after Craxton's arrest, our old friend Fred Fazakerly appeared in my office in Lincoln's Inn.
Well, Mr. Odell, I reckon you know why I'm here.
Yes, a matter of £500.
We had an agreement.
Sure. Heather,
Yes?
bring in the checkbook, will you?
Okay.
Of course, I suspected Craxton all along.
You did?
It was obvious he and Colonel Gessling's niece, Jill, they was going together. Through her, he got the use of the Colonel's garage to carry out his nefarious experiments.
Yes, I see that. How shall I make this out?
Frederick Gordon for Zachary. But all the time he had his heart set on another woman.
Is this Craxton?
Aye, he was crazy about Barbara Truscott. That's why he killed David Carswood. Oh, thanks. Very much obliged.
You're very welcome, Fred.
You was on the wrong track, you know, Odell, looking for the motive inside the laboratory, so to speak. Professional jealousy, something like that. Wrong track entirely. A woman was at the bottom of it. Cherchez la femme. You can usually depend on that, you know. Well, thanks again. I hope we can do business another time.
You can find your own way out.
Oh, yes, thanks. You should have it put up on the wall to remind you, Mr. Odell. Cherchez la femme.
He'll never know. He'll never know how wrong he is.
No. Just the same, he earned himself 500 quid. And now he can go and chercher a femme.